So welcome everybody. This is the Norfolk Advisory Committee meeting. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay, excellent. As a preliminary matter, I'd like to confirm the first advisory board members that we have with us. I'll then recognize some staff who have joined us as well as our speakers for tonight. So when I read your name, advisory committee members, please let me know that you're here, and that of course means that you can hear everything okay. I will start with alphabetically. We'll go first, Kristen Balish.
Present.
Wonderful. Brian Beachkovsky.
Present.
I am present. Michael Huff.
Present.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Present.
Jackie Katz.
Present.
Susan Klein.
Present.
Mr. Lutz is not able to make it to tonight's meeting, unfortunately. And is Kiara Moore with us?
Present.
Oh, good. Okay. I didn't notice you earlier. Thank you, Kiara. Excellent. And scrolling down our ever-shifting list of attendees, we of course have our administrator for the advisory committee, Susan Jacobson. Thank you, Susan. You can hear everything okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. We have Town Administrator Blythe Robinson, as well as Town Finance Director Todd Lindmark with us.
Present.
Todd, can you hear us okay? Outstanding, thank you. So those are sort of the official attendees. I was looking prior to this meeting, Susan Jacobson, and I could not find the name on my list of who the citizens petitioner is tonight. I'm sorry, Betsey Whitney.
Betsey Whitney.
You texted me. Betsy, are you with us this evening?
Yes, I'm right here.
Oh, wonderful. That's right.
Can
You're
you
the first person that I
Okay.
saw. There we go. So thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so let me go through some preliminary information. As everyone knows, due to current circumstances around the country, we are relying on meeting via Zoom. And I think that we're hopefully getting better at this every single meeting. I try to make adjustments as I am eager to get all of the different issues heard and understood and discussed. I do ask that first we have some material that's presented. Then the way I structure this is we'll then have questions from advisory committee members. After I feel like that discussion has matured and gone on for a time, I then welcome folks from the public. I will then open it up to other folks to join in with their questions. If you could just please state your name and your address, that would be very helpful. And when I do recognize somebody for a question, it's very important that people raise your hand. Now, how do you raise your hand, you may ask? Well, if you look at the bottom of your Zoom control, there is a participants button on most people's computer screen or phone or whatnot. When that comes up, you'll actually see a list of people and you have a button at the bottom that says raise your hand. Now I will see that and it queues everybody up at a nice list. I will get to each person in turn. In order to help keep the conversation moving, I do ask two things. First, please ask one question and we'll get a response from the experts who are with us. You can ask a follow-up question, but then I very much want to move on to other folks who have their hands up who are online, just to keep that flow going. I'm trying to avoid people coming to the microphone, as it were, and then trying to ask 10 questions because that's their one chance. So I do want to keep it moving. That's how I like to handle the flow of speakers. To also help things moving, please be additive in your questions. In other words, if something's already been addressed, I mean, feel free to agree with it, give it a shout out, but please don't spend time on material that's already been reviewed. Hopefully we can get out of here tonight at a reasonable hour, more reasonable than last time, but we'll be here for as long as it takes. So those are my preliminaries, other than to finally remind people that this meeting is being recorded for posterity. So our agenda for tonight, as I understand it, Susan, is first we are hearing from Betsy, our citizen petitioner. We'll then go into a budget discussion, and I believe that we have handouts to that effect. Lastly, we will vote and discuss some warrant articles that are on the latest warrant. And again, all of these materials have been posted on the town website, which is Norfolk.us, I believe, correct?
Arthur, there was some later additions that I did send to everybody
Okay.
today that Blythe sent out. So everybody got that email probably between 3 and 4 o'clock today.
So
There
this is the
there
latest
is
warrant? Okay.
right, and there is potentially, Blythe mentioned this in her email, there is potentially another article that could be brought forward if the select board so chooses next Tuesday to bring it forward. So in case that does happen, I did today because I wanted to give as much notice as possible, ask that petitioner to attend our meeting next Wednesday evening if the selectmen choose to go forward with that. So that's up in the air until next week.
Understood. Of course, that may happen, that may not happen. We'll wait to
Correct.
hear and take action accordingly.
And
Thank you.
the only other thing I wanted to note was, in case it's brought up, this petition has not gone, that Betsey Whitney has brought forward, has not gone before the planning board yet. That is not going to happen until June 16th. So there's no, oftentimes when petitioners bring these types of articles, advisory committee members ask what the planning board's position was, and that will not take place until June 16th.
Right, we will have an opportunity. It's happening too quickly. Okay, well, I'm eager to get the warrant locked down. I know that us having the annual meeting getting moved back several times has sort of created a opportunity for more things to be considered, which again, I'm eager to get that finalized. So we know what it is that we're dealing with now. So thanks for that, Susan. I will bring up the citizens petition. Did you have, Betsy, Ms. Whitney, did you want to share your screen, or should I just bring up the citizens petition on mine?
You can do whatever's easy for you.
All righty, share screen. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so hopefully you were looking at the language of the citizens petition.
Yes.
I'll try to zoom in. I know people's devices can sometimes be on the small side. Okay, so you have the floor, Ms. Whitney. I'm sorry, Blythe?
I know it's Sue again. Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
sorry, Sue.
I just want to make sure that this is, so there's been several edits to this petition, and I just want to make sure it's the latest one that Blythe sent this afternoon.
Blythe is shaking her nose, her nose, shaking her head. No, sorry, shaking her head.
It's not.
All righty. Well, let me stop
It's the
sharing.
one- It's date stamped May 28th that I sent out today.
Susan, do you see that? Is that something that you can share? You are a co-host. You're muted.
Let me see if I can bring that up, okay? Hold
Okay,
on
so
one
if you
second.
could do that, and we will let Ms. Whitney get started. So I will stop my sharing. And you have the floor, Betsy, please.
Okay, fine. Basically, going back to 2013, when by town meeting vote, a bylaw was passed allowing on Valley Street, Hill Street, and Old Pond Road for residential development, special permit that passed. And we have had some very successful residential development take place in my immediate neighborhood. It is off highway. And I had been in contact with several neighborhood folks in Pondville and chatting about what changes would we possibly like to see in our immediate neighborhoods. And I found that Pondville residents, if expansion did come to our neighborhood, that they would love it to be more residential. And to this end, to complete the vision of having Pondville really become the real neighborhood that it was a century ago. In the late 50s, it tended to become used more commercially. In the not so distant past, Shire Industrial Park was built on Route 1A for commercial and industrial, which had gotten me thinking that residential by special permit is a real possibility for what I call Pondville proper, which would include Valley Street, Hill Street, Old Pond Street, on and off Highway 115, perhaps parts of Route 1A, that I personally and many neighbors agreed with me. They would love to see the residential trend continue. Now, Everett Street has been residential forever, but Valley, Hill, and Old Pond and Route 115 have reserved the right to develop commercially. We'd love to see the option exist by special permit for residential growth. That's the bottom line behind my hopes. So that having been said, I do remind board members that this is by special permit, that we are not thinking in terms, or I'm not thinking in terms of stopping commercial and development by right, but just hoping that the option for further residential development be inexistent. So that having been said, I think it's fairly cut and dry. I would be very happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, we'll take questions from people. Please raise your hand. I will start with advisory committee members. Susan Klein, yes, please state your question.
I just want to double check that I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes.
In layman's terms, you want to say that the area that you deem Pondville, or what people deem Pondville proper, should only be allowed to be commercial through a special permit with the planning board.
No,
It'd be zoned residential, but you'd go to the planning board if you wanted it to be commercial.
no, what my intention is within the zoning that exists here, which is commercial, allowing residential by special permit. That's the bylaw change that goes back to May of 2013. So residential development in this area, specifically the streets that I have just mentioned, are by special permit from the planning board. So
But you want to change it to zoning and residential by right?
no,
No? Okay.
no, it's really simpler than that. It's just giving the option for a developer to propose a residential project on highway and off highway in the C1D district by special permit. It's not a right, it's by special permit. So it's extending the use of special permit as I see it. Off
Okay,
highway, oh, excuse me, I don't,
no, please go ahead.
where did I get that? Okay. Start my video.
Your video cut out. There, you're back now.
Okay.
You're doing great.
Yeah. It used to be that residential development had ended way back in the late 1950s. In 2013, residential development by special permit in this specific area was passed at town meeting. Again, if a person wanted to develop residentially, special permit had to be granted by the planning board. But it was large, it was off highway. There are some specific areas on highway, namely Route 115 or Pine Street, possibly some areas on Dedham Street, which is 1A, that could be suitable for residential development.
Okay, I got you.
Not by right, okay.
Okay, I got you. You're saying it already says that for off highway. You also want it to say the same for on highway.
Yes, in a nice, thank you.
Sometimes it helps to
Yeah.
put it in layman's terms. Got it. Okay, I understand.
Did you have a follow-up question, Susan?
No, I would like someone, I don't know if it should be Betsy or if should be someone from the planning board, to show us a map at some point of what exactly parts of 115 are considered Pondville proper, as she referred to them. Like how far down 15 does Pondville proper go? I think that would help to give some
Okay,
context.
so Susan Jacobson, could you make a note to request that?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So moving on, Michael Huff. Yes, sir. Please ask your question.
Yeah, Ms. Whitney, just a question. So what because you live in that neighborhood, in your vision of the future, what would you like to see? I understand what this warrant is doing, but I want to know what your vision is.
My vision is to see more residential growth take place. Now, years and years ago, when we moved here in the early 1980s, this was commercial. Our house was grandfathered as a residential in a commercial area, I guess is what we were described as being. Nobody, residential development was nothing that anybody even considered until 2013. Some building took place on Valley Street to the left of our house, and more recently, across the street from us, some beautiful condominiums, and most of them are occupied. And it is wonderful if you're pretty much the only house. There is a house on Hill Street that's nearby, but other than that, it was just us. 2 houses on Old Pond, which is next to my house. It is wonderful to think that we could have the option of residential development if a developer or a builder so chose. But it would be by special permit. It would, of course, go before and be vetted by the planning board.
Your order?
Yes.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you so much. That's what I wanted to talk to.
Okay. Could I just add a PS? This was, yes, the commercial area. This was expected to be built up so as to generate revenue from, of course, industrial and commercial. In 2006, Shire Industrial Park was built. It is a huge, and it still has lots of room for development. It's a huge area at the end of Sharon's Ave, if people are familiar with it. And to me, it just seems that that is a good location to be putting commercial and industrial. To me, residential has been the trend that has been in forward motion since 2013, and here we are going on 2021. Would love to see that continue. I know I talk a lot. I try to keep to my notes.
No, that's fine. You've done a lot of work on this. Very, very interested in your perspective. That's why we have you here tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Huff, Michael Huff. Yes, please. Your question.
Sorry, I'm all set about it.
You're all set, so you did not have a follow-up. Okay, very good. All righty. Kristen Balish. Yes, Ms. Balish, your question.
2 quick questions. So just to clarify what I'm hearing, it is currently zoned as purely commercial. And that is it?
It's commercial, but residential by special permit. Yes,
So how is this changing it then, if you're asking it to be residential?
I'm
by
asking
permit?
off highway
Okay,
is residential development by special permit. I would like to see off and on highway
okay.
have the option. Yeah.
So my question is, when this goes to town meeting and you have to kind of talk to the public about this, there may be some folks that say, why do you want more residential development? There's 40Bs everywhere, right? I'm not saying I would say that. I think there will be people that say, oh my gosh, are you crazy, right? Because a lot of people are fighting against residential. And clearly you've articulated well why the residents actually want to see a vision, which I think is really important. But how would you respond to folks that would potentially be worried about inviting developments that they have been fighting against so far?
I guess I would say it is your right to have those opinions. It is your right to have those visions, just as it is my right to have my hopes and dreams and visions. And both of us would go to the same meeting and present our rationale and hope to succeed. In other words, that's how it goes. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah,
Thanks.
quite frankly.
Okay, Mr. Hurwitz, Jonathan Hurwitz, yes, please, your question.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Whitney. Just this is more of an asking your opinion on something. Clearly, you've made, I think, a good case for desiring more residential development as opposed to commercial. But I think the trend, certainly not only in this town, but in all similar towns, development is trending towards mixed use, where there would be some commercial, say, on the first floor and residential on upper floors or some similar configuration. Just from an opinion perspective, what is your opinion on that? Is that the sort of development that you'd be desiring and that you're looking for, kind of mixed use, or is that not really aligned with the vision that you're looking for?
You know, I haven't had anybody ask me that question. Now that you do, it makes me think, well, that is a possibility. And I think that each person, each developer, each builder would present their idea that could be mixed use and present a case for it. And people in the neighborhood would have to present their case as to whether they are for or against it. But at least to have the option of residential by special permit and take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Unmute. Okay, I do not see. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something to add?
Well, it just made me think about the development that has taken place since 2013 in my immediate area, as a matter of fact, on my immediate street. And 8 to 12 condominiums. 4 buildings with 2 condominiums across the street from us and 4 units to the left of our house. Most of them are occupied, and it is a beautiful addition. I love the residential component as opposed to the mixed use. I really, now that I rethink it, I probably would say, well, I think I would like the option for residential on my street, probably whatever parcels are, or definitely whatever parcels are available on 115 Hill Street, and not too much space left on Old Pond, which is right next to our house. So I would have to say that mixed use would be debatable. I would really want that discussed at planning board. So,
Okay, thank you very much.
Martha, for that question.
Okay, did you have a follow-up question, Jonathan, or are you good? All set, okay. Brian Bichkowski, yes, Brian, go ahead.
Hi, I was pulling up the state GIS with lot lines and the like, and it I don't know if it's possible to share a screen here, but let me. It might be possible to bring up some of those zoning questions. And if this is just adding residential along Pine Street and Dedham Street, is that what this is doing by special permit? You could get residential on Pine and Dedham, because the other ones I think you said are allowable for special permit today.
I'm thinking there are, no, it wouldn't be confined just to those areas that you just referenced. It would, there are some parcels on Valley Street that are owned and still sitting there as untouched woods. Hill Street has, I don't think I'm thinking of parcels on Hill.
So my understanding, and it might be on me, I think you were saying that the off-highway is currently allowed by special permit.
I'm under the impression that it is, as of the 2013 bylaw, by special permit, yes.
Right, so that this wouldn't affect those, it would only affect the on-highway.
Correct,
Right.
correct. Everything that's in place is in place. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is specifically for the on-highway portions.
Well, it really would, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just looking at the map, I guess I would be very interested to see what the planning board says, because most of those lots look like they have structures on them currently. I agree with you that the ones that are off highway are more available. I'm just trying to try and figure out what this opens up as opposed to the way the bylaws are now. And it seems like maybe it would only be a stretch along 1A that would be opened up, but that's where the Stop River runs through.
Well, yeah, that's wetlands down
Yeah,
there.
that's wetlands.
Actually, at the end of Valley Street, as you approach 115, if you take a left,
Mhm.
I'm thinking of that piece
Yep.
of highway. And if you take a right, yes, Pondville Medical is there. There are buildings on the other side of the highway, but there are various little parcels here and there.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to me it would be nice to have at least the possibility, the hope of something in the residential domain.
And then, of course, if you continue down Pine Street, there are residential on Pine
Yes.
Street once you get outside of that. So it's not abnormal in this area to have
No.
residential on Pine Street.
Just as in a city, it is not abnormal to have buildings that people live in next to buildings that are stores that may have a residence above it. But it isn't that residence is always a house and a driveway and a garage.
Right.
It
Okay, well,
takes
thank you.
different forms. Thank you very much for that question.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Susan Klein, yes, please, your question.
I'm sorry, just to follow up from earlier. Have you, in your research that you've done and the experience that you've had going through this, have you spoken to any developers that are interested in building in this area?
I haven't spoken with developers for this particular reason. I am very friendly with the developer who has done development on Valley Street. and who does, and we go back 10 years. And I was very nervous when developers started looking at Valley Street. I was afraid that I would be looking at brick buildings across the street from our house that was built in about 1730. I wanted more houses. I am motivated by loving Pondville and wanting residential. I do know that 7 Hill Street, I was at several meetings. A special permit was granted for condominiums. As I said a little earlier, yep, there are lots of condominiums across the street from us. That's, the bylaw does not permit single residences to be built. The bylaw that exists of 2013. So anyway, your question.
What you're saying is you haven't spoken to any developers, you don't know what their intentions are, but from what your understanding is, it could only be condos or apartments anyway. It wouldn't be.
Yes, the bylaw of 2013 does not allow a single family house on Valleys. At least that's my understanding. So no, nobody. There's quite a bit of land still undeveloped on Valley Street, and I have been worrying about it as time has gone on. And I just thought, wouldn't it be nice if the option for residential existed? Wouldn't that's just a personal feeling I have.
Okay, thank you. Susan, did you have a follow-up question?
Okay.
Thank
You're all
you.
set. Okay, I will now open up questions to the general public. Ed Haddad, you've been waiting for a while. Yes, your question, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney, what I've seen in other towns is when you have residential and commercial areas in very close alignment with each other. And in this case, where it was originally a commercially zoned area, what starts to happen is as residential moves in, they start fighting the commercial. You hear things like traffic and noise and lights and things like that. So do you think that's a risk? You know, we want commercial development in Norfolk, and that we have areas that are specifically designated for them. Why wouldn't we want to give them their let's say freedom to develop instead of worrying about them having to tiptoe around residential development?
Ed, the connection wasn't very good, so I tried to follow you. I think you're saying that in other towns, the commercial near the residential doesn't work out well because of noise issues and.
Well, I think what happens is as your residential abuts commercial, they start fighting with each other because their objectives are different. Residential doesn't want commercial development, and they start sort of objecting to things like traffic, noise, lighting, which is very common to commercial development. So if we have areas that are specifically designated commercial, why do we want to risk that, let's say, conflict between two different very objectives of residential and commercial?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes.
Yeah,
Betsy, go ahead.
I don't see that we have come to the conclusion that specifically Valley Street, part of Pine Street, Old Pond Road next to me, I don't see that we've committed that we committed in 2013. Yes, it's a commercial zone with residential by special permit, and it's worked well. I can only go on what's happened, and it's worked very well, as a matter of fact.
Okay, thank you for that perspective, Ms. Whitney.
Okay.
So I'd like to, I believe your question was answered, Mr. Haddad, yes?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Whitney.
Thank
Todd Lindmark, yes, please. Go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, hi Betsy, this is Todd.
Hi, Todd.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. So you'll have to excuse my ignorance. I only do accounting, so I know 1 + 1 = 2. Can you explain to me the density of not less than 4 units per 30,000 square feet or greater lot, and not more than 1 unit per 5,000? What does that actually mean for the development of that particular area?
You know, the beginning of this bylaw was written in 2013, and I was not the author of that particular sentence, but to me, it means we can't have a bunch of rooming houses, to put it frankly, okay? That the units have to be not bigger than, not smaller than the description here. And in other words, we're just not looking to see apartment houses built. I don't know if that answers your question.
I kind of get that, but it's the words that are there where it says not less than 4 units, which means that you have to have at least 4 units.
Yes, yes, that's
30,000?
what that means. Yeah,
For every 3/4 acre, basically, you have to have at least 4 units.
and I call them houses, the 4 red connected houses to the left of my house are following this bylaw of 2013, and that's exactly what is there. 4 units on that amount of land. There's front lawn, there's small backyards. So I would say that the intention is that there isn't too much all jammed in.
Yeah.
There's
Again,
room-
just to clarify from my understanding, so it looks
Yeah.
like you have to have at least 4, but no more than 6, because you have a 1 unit per 5,000 square feet of land limitation.
This, yeah, and this bylaw is already in existence. I didn't write the beginning of this part. I added on.
I
So
got you.
probably somebody else, a builder, could answer your question better than me.
Thank you.
I love the development that has taken place on our street, and I always call this my street. I wrote a book about Pondville, and I published it in 2011. I love this place. I'm real protective of it. So
Yep. Thank you.
thank you.
Understood. Thank you for that. I actually have a question. You make a very, very good case, I think. There's a lot of upsides and positives. Zoning is complicated. There's a
I
lot of
know.
numbers. I'm looking, yeah, it's, there's,
I know.
and then there's the law of unintended consequences. Have you spoken with folks on the planning board at all, either formally or informally, about the bylaw and your desire to modify it in this way?
No, I really,
And I'm sorry, I should say the zoning committee, not the planning board. I am getting the
you mean ZBA?
That's the zoning board of appeals.
Zoning, that's the only formal talk. It was when I talked with the selectmen a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So, and Aaron Hunt said he was the one who brought up zoning issues. So I started, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this. So I'm sort of learning as I go.
Sure.
So no, I have not made that step yet.
Who would actually, I'm looking here, I know that there's a B1 zoning working committee. Which committee would have jurisdiction over considering zoning questions?
Zoning.
The standing zoning committee. Okay, that's what I
Zoning
thought.
Board
Okay.
of Appeals. Yeah, the B1
It is
is just
ZBA? Okay.
B1 is just a working group who only deals with the B1 district of Norfolk, which is the downtown.
Downtown, yeah.
This is a C1D, I believe is what she said.
Yes.
So this would fall under zoning and planning to a certain extent, but zoning.
So when we talk about the zoning committee, we mean ZBA.
Yes, ZBA.
Okay, ZB, all right,
The select board and the ZBA are two different boards.
yeah.
Right, and ZBA has a lot of expertise, of course, on these issues. And again,
Absolutely.
you've done a lot of very good research, and this looks like a very, very interesting and compelling proposal. What would make me feel more comfortable supporting it is if there was a chance for the zoning board to fully review this. And then what'll happen is, I mean, ideally, you think it's a great thing. They think it's a great thing. They then bring they then sponsor the warrant article. Or perhaps there's some modifications, that you get input from them. Perhaps they're more conversant with some of the downsides of these particulars or other issues that are impacted by this. I really like to see the zoning board's perspective before sort of making changes directly to the code like that.
Now, so how would that roll out? Would that be my job to call up the ZBA and say, oh, I need to come talk to you about my idea, my vision?
Yeah, I don't know if Blythe, maybe you have an idea. Is there a ZBA hotline? I mean, I'm saying that I'm saying that in jest. But is there a proper procedure here?
Actually, I think where the appropriate place to go is the planning board, because
Oh, it's a planning board. Okay.
would issue
you're
the
right.
special permit, and ZBA would not have that same role. So I think that would be more appropriate. And in speaking with Rich McCarthy today and coordinating everything, the planning board, I believe, is supposed to take action on this, as Sue said earlier, on June 16th.
June 16th, yeah.
So I think certainly you can have informal, one-on-one conversations, but that's really where you're going to get that feedback.
Arthur, I think that if I understand Susan Jacobson's point of this, was because we have very limited time to approve the warrant before town meeting. If we waited to discuss this until after June 16th, there would be no time for our recommendation. So as much as I think we would like to hear the planning board or zoning board's opinion on this, I don't believe we would have the time after June 16th to then discuss it and vote on it, because at that point, the warrant would already need to have been printed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean,
So unfortunately, I'm saying we may have to move for a vote on this tonight or next week prior to the planning board actually discussing it.
understood. And sharing the perspective that I am. I mean, I'm comfortable recommending, and so I would like to get this right and not rush it. So to me, an indefinite postponement to allow time for the planning board to have a look at this. I mean, fall town meeting is not that far away. We keep pushing off this
I
one.
think if you want to hear from the planning board, either about this warrant or find out if they're going to support it before we vote on it, the only choice we have is indefinite postponement, not because we don't support it, not because we do support it, simply because Susan Jacobson's raising her hand. She may have more information. I'm just not sure we have enough time after June 16th.
Susan Jacobson, yes, did you have a comment?
Sure. So in the past, if something like this comes up, typically what happens, for those of you that have been on the advisory committee for some time, because we won't have the planning board's information before the warrant goes to print, a decision is made to sometimes move forward with IPing it, but then you give the planning board the opportunity at town meeting to come up and say whether their position is to support this, and the advisory board or the advisory committee can say that at the time that decision was made, exactly what Susan said, we did not have the feedback from the planning board at that time. So the planning board chair, Walter Byron, comes up to the microphone and tells everyone why he supports it, and the advisory committee says that the only reason at that time that it was indefinitely postponed was because they didn't have the planning board's decision.
Understood. So we could simply choose to make a recommendation at town meeting, I suppose. I hate doing things like the hour before, especially with like a zoning question.
Well,
it doesn't feel like a lot of time.
Unfortunately, if you want the feedback from the planning board, the only choice would be to discuss it at town meeting or just prior to. I mean, we could certainly hold a meeting after June 16th but our recommendation would not be in the article, but we could
Sure.
certainly have our arguments for or against ready for town meetings, so that we're not discussing it the night of. We certainly have time for an additional meeting after that. But if you want to interview the planning board, you want to have them come and present before the advisory board, the only choice would be to postpone it till the fall. I would assume that is not what Mrs. Whitney wants. I would also assume with having it be a special town meeting and there being, the tax rate and everything else that needs to be discussed at the special town meeting, that might not be what their intention is. So I would suggest that we move ahead with the way the other Susan is describing it, which is IP it, not because we don't support it, just simply because we want to give the planning board a chance. And then we meet after June 16th to discuss it so that we're prepared for town meeting, but we don't necessarily, and then we can let town meeting know what our vote is. It just wouldn't be printed in the article.
Understood. Yeah, and that's where my head's at. That's why I wanted to go through this, was just because to make it clear that I'm interested in more vetting, just to get that perspective. Folks do have their hands up. Christopher Weeder, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Please, sir, ask your question.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm wearing my zoning board chairman hat, and the zoning
Welcome.
board of appeals.
You're most welcome. Excellent timing.
Yeah, the zoning board of appeals does not adopt zoning articles. That's hence why we're called the zoning board of appeals. We
Right.
hear appeals to zoning articles. It would be the planning board that would be reviewing this. As much as we always enjoy Betsy coming to any zoning board meeting, it would be the planning board that would be reviewing this.
That's very helpful. Thank you for the clarification.
welcome.
Peter Chipman, yes, sir. Please ask your question.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Just point of clarification, all zoning articles by Mass General Law has to have a public hearing before the town meeting in front of the planning board. So it's something that has been done the night of, and normally, rather than have a negative connotation in the warrant, you've written in the past, Arthur, and I'm pretty sure you were on this committee at
Yes,
the time.
that we defer a recommendation until town meeting, correct?
And I think that's much more positive way, given Betsy's efforts in this matter.
I mean, that would allow, and thank you for that perspective. I mean, that would very much allow, if everyone's on the same page, and this is, I don't know, to use a term, a no-brainer, there's only upsides, that's great. My only concern is then we don't have a chance to ask you questions. I mean, I guess we could on the floor of the town meeting, but it's nice to kind of get into some of the specifics with the planning board prior to town meeting. Sure, you guys will have your meeting on the 16th.
Not me, but I'm sure Betsy, she can handle it. She's pretty tough.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, Brian Bichkowski, yes, sir.
Yeah, just one quick question. I hope it's quick. Because these would be multi-unit dwellings, do all of those count towards our affordable housing requirements for 40B, or would these not count towards our affordable housing? I forget how that works.
I would ask you to ask somebody who's an expert in that, and it's not me.
The answer to that is
artists, business owners, and chefs.
hi. Hold on. The answer to that is it is apartments, and it's a 40B. Then, whereas it would have normally been 25%, 100% count towards your number. If it is single family, duplex, or condominiums, then it's still just the 25% that counts. If it's non-40B, it's currently 10%, but I think we're actually, Kevin, please correct me if I'm wrong, if we're attempting to change it to 15% instead of 10% when you do a non-40B. That piece I could be mistaken on, I apologize. No, we're not. Was that a discussion in the B1? No, okay. He says it was not, so it would stay 10%.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification. Richard McCarthy, yes, sir, please. Oh, hang on, Susan
Sorry.
Jacobson, yes.
So I just wanted to, I wasn't sure I heard you correctly. If it is a 40B project, it is 25% of the units.
Yeah, that's what.
If they're single family, similar to Boyd's Crossing. You're correct in saying that if it's an apartment, it is 25%. If it is a development that contains 10 or more units, then for every 10 units, they have to provide one affordable unit.
That's for non-40B.
Correct.
Right, non-40B is 10%. Obviously, you need 10 to get 10% because you can't build less
Correct.
than 1. So that's just common. Like I said, it's 10% if it's non-40B. It's 25% if it is a 40B. But if what you're building under 40B is apartments, then 100% of those units, even though 100% is not 40B, they still count. So for example, when the development was going to be on Main Street at 194 Main, when it was going to be 60 apartment units, all 60 counted towards our 40B number, but only actually 25% of them were going to be affordable, but they counted towards it because the state deems apartments affordable in and of itself. But now that they're going to be, I guess, duplexes, I think is what the proper term is. I could be wrong about that. I haven't seen anything more than the pictures that we saw last week. I believe they are back to only 25% of them will count towards our number. So it would be the same in this district. If someone built an apartment complex, then they would all count. If they built shared common neighborhood type housing, even if they're connected, they wouldn't be apartments. So they would be 25.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of complexity here. This is also why I like having the planning board be able to speak. Thank you for sharing all of that. Brian, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Excellent. Richard McCarthy, yes, sir. Please ask your question.
Actually, I didn't have a question. Just trying to clarify one of the points which Susan did, which was 10 or more. It's an inclusionary for affordable right now.
Okay. Very good. Peter Chipman, yes, sir. Your question.
Yes, Arthur, just a point of clarification again. This has nothing to do with 40B. We're talking about an allowed use zoning article, and only until 10 units kick in does an affordable unit even, it's relevant. I don't want, I guess, Betsey's article getting tagged with around the whole 40B discussion, because as you know, you can put it at 40B anywhere if you get the site eligibility letter. So.
Yeah. Thank you. I was actually asking the opposite of would this help if it weren't a 40B, but it sounds like it doesn't unless it's above 10 units and then they have one that's affordable, but that keeps that at the 10% level and doesn't actually change the overall 40B situation we have.
This has nothing to do with 40B whatsoever.
Okay. Thank
you, Peter, for
Thank you
that
for that clarification. I do not see any other questions. No other hands are raised. So
just Arthur, just for point of clarification,
sure.
with Mr. Chipman, Betsey's specific article has nothing to do with 40B. She is not asking for 40B or otherwise. She's simply asking for it to be residential on highway, because it is allowed residential right now off highway. She's asking for it to be on highway allowed residential. However, once that opens up, you do not get to dictate who owns that land and what they build on it if it is allowed. So if they wanted to say that it doesn't have anything to do with 40B, that is correct, meaning what Betsey has brought has nothing to do with it. She is not saying one way or the other what she wants to see there. She just wants it to be residential. But again, same as in the B1 district, same as any district in town, the owner of the land gets to dictate what goes there. If they don't get what they want through zoning, they will go 40B, and then you don't have a say. So I am not saying that is in any way tied to what Betsey is asking for, but we can never say it's not anything to do with 40B.
Thank you, Susan. Peter, did you have a comment or a clarification about that? Or
40Bs go wherever the hell they want to go, period.
Exactly.
Agreed. Okay, Jen Wynn, yes, please. What is your question? Are you unmuted, Ms. Wynn? No, I think she's still
Sorry,
muted.
can't believe I did
That's okay. Welcome.
this all day. My question is that area, there's a large amount of land, and I understand Betsey wanting to preserve the history there and wanting more residential. But now I'm curious, if they open it up to residential, and that is a lot of commercial land there, could somebody buy it now thinking, okay, in another year, it's going to be turned into residential. I'll buy this large lot and put up a multi-apartment complex. Is that where people are going with the 40B? Like, that's what I would do personally if I had the money.
Well, I
I
mean,
guess
I-
Betsy, I'd be a little concerned that if you did open it up, you could be opening it up to, as Peter Chipman said, 40Bs go wherever they want. Somebody could put in a an Avalon housing complex, right?
Betsy, did you have thoughts on this, a response?
Are you worried about that? I would be.
I had not gotten, that's a little out of my realm of thinking. I am listening very hard to this conversation. So I would really like to hear feedback from other people.
Yeah, I am a black hat thinker, you know, so and I wouldn't want to live in a place where I'm like, ooh, I'd be a little nervous knowing the propensity and the appetite for people to buy up land in this town and turn them into 40Bs for their own, obviously it's America, their own income. I would be nervous personally. So just something to think about, but I don't live in that area, so I don't have a horse in the race.
So if a developer wants to do a 40B project, they pretty much have carte blanche? Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Jen and Betsy, if I could speak to this for just 2 seconds. And Arthur, I know you like to move along, but she asked a
Yes,
question.
I
want to be able
do.
to
You're
answer her
correct about
correctly.
that, Susan. Yes.
Let me
Please be
just
brief. Yes.
answer Jen's question correctly. If I am mistaken, please feel free, Rich McCarthy, to speak up and let me know how I'm mistaken. Obviously, I don't know everything, but from what I read from what Betsy was saying, right now, can everyone hear me? It says my connection's unstable. Okay.
You're just a little choppy, but
Excuse
I
me.
hear you fine.
Right now, okay. Right now, Jen, what it says is there's a difference in zoning by right and 40B. And I think that's where people get confused. Zoning by right, what she's asking for is to change the by right zoning for this area. So right now, it only allows, if you go through zoning, you build it non-40B, you are just building whatever you want, you're a homeowner, a landowner, and you want to build something. You can only build 4 separate apartment units or 4 separate units on a specific lot. I believe that's what she said earlier. Again, please, Rich McCarthy, correct me if I'm wrong. So if you're talking about by right zoning, they could not build a giant apartment complex. It wouldn't happen.
Correct.
And if you want to go 40B, if anyone who owns a piece of property wants it to go 40B, it doesn't matter where they are. They can build 40B anywhere they want. So this is only changing the by right zoning to allow for those units that would be around 4 units, bedrooms, housing units, apartments, complexes, townhouses, however you want to, residences, I guess is the best word to use. Zoning by right and 40B are yes, they're both developments, but they are completely separate. When you do by right, which is what she's asking for, they would be limited to the 4 residences. To build a giant apartment complex, it would have to be 40B, and 40B doesn't go by zoning rights anyway. They would screw all of these no matter what. You couldn't stop them if they wanted to come in today. So that never matters. Zoning changes are only what is by right.
Thank you for the clarification. I see Betsy shaking her head. I think we've achieved understanding. Mr. McCarthy, was there something that you wanted to add on that?
I was just going to try to simplify it. Think of 3 boxes. One is by right development that's put place by the town of Norfolk. Special permit uses, which are adopted by zoning changes by the town of Norfolk. Then 40B. Betsy's asking to add additional area along Route Pine Street 1A for what's already being allowed in the district area behind it by special permit. It's not by right. It goes through the planning board. 40B, just 40B, it's a special, 40B is completely a different, it shouldn't really, it's okay to discuss it, but it just sidetracks the conversation, because if you want to do 40B, they could do it today where any of these properties are. It doesn't matter what the zoning is. And that was just the point that Mr. Chipman was trying to make.
That's very helpful.
So
thank you for the buckets. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. Mr. Chipman, was there a question that you had? I see your hand is up. But
Sorry about that. All I want to say is this is an incentive to actually block out potential 40B, because it will give an incentive to a proven developer who happens to own a couple of the spots along Pine Street, and I believe it reaches Long Valley, to do similar development, what they've already done in front of Betsey Whitney's house in the form of the condos and some smaller apartments, without having to go through the actual 40B process, which is onerous and it's not fun. So therefore, you're actually playing defense here if you're supportive of this article.
Okay, thank you very much for that point. Jen Wynn, yes, Ms. Wynn, you had a question.
Sorry, nope, sorry. Nope, Peter
Oh, okay.
Chipman answered it. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, we are out of hands being up. So thank you everyone for that robust discussion. And thank you so much for Ms. Whitney for bringing all this to our attention and the research that you've done.
Thank you very much. This was, you know, as I always joke, at the tender young age of almost 76, I think I know it all. This was very enlightening, and I appreciate the time and the depth and all the attention that you've given it. Thank you.
Well, thank you again. And I will now turn our meeting and agenda over to a discussion of how we want to handle our response to this particular petition. Now, what I'd like to do is I would like to get a sense of, are people more inclined to, and I'm sort of leaning more in this direction. I mean, if the planning board is taking the trouble to have a meeting on this specifically on June 16th, it would be nice for us to at least leave open the possibility for this to be, you know, if everything goes smoothly, to then be considered and acted upon without some kind of a, we're just going to punt right now until the fall town meeting. So that's how I'm leading, but I also understand if folks have perspectives. To me, one of the best ways to go about this is if people have other things that they think or other approaches that they think would make sense. So we've talked about either deciding to not make a recommendation. We're just going to say, you know what, we're going to make a recommendation at town meeting. So we vote for that, or we can vote to indefinitely postpone. Are there any other avenues of approach or candidates for voting that somebody would like to put forward? Susan, yes. I see your hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to, before you said that, I was actually going to make a motion that we move on this article, move forward. And I would say vote on the article. And then if it, based on the discussion, if people would prefer, if they vote no because they want to IP it, or they vote yes because they want it to pass, then that's where we would be at. So I make a motion.
Okay, well, before we entertain that, prior to entertaining that motion, would anyone like to have any other discussion regarding our options here? Kristen Bilish, yes.
So, you know, I'm inclined to vote for it, but I'm worried that something might change if I hear something at the 16th meeting. But I also feel like it's a pretty simple one to put forward if planning board says, yeah, this is fine. So I wouldn't want to punt it to the fall. So I'm just wondering, you know, I'm kind of okay with the option of waiting for us to vote and not having our answer in the warrant. I remember seeing the last time that this board did that when I wasn't yet on the board and,
yes,
and understanding what that meant.
That's very much an option.
So that's something.
And that might be what Susan is going to move. That might be the motion. I don't know.
So we absolutely
Well, my motion
can
is
put
simple.
the committee. I didn't mean to imply me, but you absolutely can. We can put in the warrant that at the time the warrant went to print, the board did not, you know, it's very simple. It can just say at the time that the warrant went to print, the board did not have enough information, or the board was waiting for a meeting. It's very
Understood.
easy.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. No, Susan Klein, yes.
If we IP it for that reason, if we IP it now, like today, you know, if we're not comfortable and want to say IP just so something is in the actual warrant that goes out, I worry that people that are a little kind of savvy about this stuff usually read IP as us saying no. because that is
Yes, so
usually.
Kristen.
That's what
Sorry,
I,
Kristen.
about
So,
yeah.
right, so, okay, hold on.
Okay.
So this is why I'm trying to clarify the options that people are voting for before we do any motions. So again, I'm trying to say there's two options. Option number one, we make a motion and vote to not make a recommendation until town meeting. That's option one.
Okay.
Option two, somebody can make a motion to the IP. So that to me, I think are the options that are in front of us. Do people agree? Is
I
there,
would like-
is there a third option?
I would like
Susan
to-
Klein, yes.
Yes, what I was trying to say a minute ago was part of, and this may come across as super, I can't use the words I'm wanting to use, I apologize.
Diplomatic.
But this may come across as not very polite, or it may come across as sort of snarky. But there's been a lot of discussion in our past couple of months of meetings that has been said by people that we aren't qualified to make decisions. Well, I actually disagree with that. I think that based on the information that we have tonight, we have how we feel about zoning in general, how we feel about planning in general, how we feel the town feels, how we feel the resident of this area feels. We aren't qualified to make that motion. So I am not saying that, I am actually saying I think we should vote, because if we're saying that we are an independent body that can make these decisions, that we don't need to be told what to do by the planning board or by the select board or by whomever, then we should be making this vote based on ourselves and how we feel about it, and how we feel that it is our job to best represent the town. And this town includes Pondville. So I'm actually not saying that we should wait until after the 16th. I understand that earlier that's what I was saying, but I wasn't saying it because that was my opinion. I was saying it because I was letting you, Arthur, know that the timing would not work out, not because that's what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I actually firmly believe
Understood.
that this board is qualified and capable of making this decision without hearing from the planning board. We have heard from the residents, it's a citizen petition. It's not a plan. If this were a planning board's petition, then we would need to hear from the planning board, but it's not. We are voting on what this citizen wants. So therefore, I am, again, moving to vote on the petition. If it fails, then we still have the option of voting again after, moving forward. So
Okay, Susan, a couple points of clarification. You've said multiple times you support voting on this petition. That is not helpful. What you're saying is you vote to IP. So there's two votes. I'm trying to say we are going to vote. You're asking for a vote. We are going to vote. I'm saying one option is to vote for IP. Another option is to vote to then just approve this. A third option is to say we are going to then defer action until town meeting. So we are going to take a vote. But I believe what you're actually asking for is to pass it, that you vote to approve it, correct?
Yes, that's what I said initially. I vote to
Oh,
approve.
sorry, I missed the word approve. Okay.
Initially, not in
Excellent.
this
Okay,
last time, but initially.
So there is a motion on the floor to approve the citizens petition. Do we have a second? Zoom might be choppy. Mike, how far are you seconding, or is your hand up for a question?
I'll
I have a
second.
question.
It's Jackie.
Okay, so Jackie has seconded. So Susan has made a motion. Jackie has seconded. And I believe that Mike has a question.
Just, Susan, from my perspective, the reason to have the planning board take a look at this is because there are technicalities here that I am not qualified to say. Whether or not the restrictions put into the language are applicable or not. I just don't have that. I feel like I need the expertise of the planning board to vet that.
Correct. And
Understood.
again, what I was saying, I am not actually saying I want to pass it or not pass it. I'm simply saying that I want to vote to approve, which would mean if you want to wait and you're going to IP it, then that would also, in essence, be IPing it. I do not want to do, and again, I am just one person in that you guys can vote to do this. I'm simply saying that my opinion is I do not want to vote to say that we are not making this decision until after the planning board weighs in, because this is not a petition that has been submitted by the planning board. If we want to have questions asked, then we don't vote until.
Susan, just a point of clarification. We are not, again, the vote to postpone is a vote to say the select board agreed to wait until town meeting. Now, we may have the intention of saying we're waiting for the planning board, but that's not what we're voting on. What we're voting on is simply waiting until town meeting. So again, 3 options: approve, which I believe is what you are moving towards, correct?
I am asking to approve that way.
Right,
That-
which
that way
is a vote
everyone
for
can-
this. Right, which means printed in the warrant will then be, if this passes, this motion passes, then printed in the warrant, it will say the advisory board recommends that citizens approve this. So that would be the outcome of
Yes.
voting for the motion, which is on the table.
Yes.
Okay, so does that answer your question, Mike? I guess you're making more of a statement. Okay, so again, we have a motion to approve that the advisory board would then approve the citizens petition. And there is a second. So now we discuss this. So anyone wants to raise their hand for further clarifications or discussion? Going once, going twice, I haven't seen anything. Okay, well, I will share some perspectives. I mean, I do appreciate what you're saying, Susan, about expertise. You know, that we do have the capability to then move on this. I fit in, I think, more of Mike's category. I would really like to hear multiple opinions who have deep knowledge on this particular topic. So that's my first concern, is I do want to hear other perspectives and opinions. I don't feel comfortable approving something which the planning board may say, oh, well, we're going to modify this, and the petitioner may think that that's a great idea too. Of course, they can write something in a town meeting, but I feel like, why should we vote on something before it's fully baked? The second concern that I have is, just because we can do a thing doesn't mean that it's wise to. We have spent almost an hour and a half on what is a relatively simple zoning petition. How many zoning petitions do we want citizens to then petition us for? I don't want us to be some kind of avenue as an alternate to the planning board. I would very much love the planning board to then take the lead on this work. We have plenty of work of our own to do without sort of being an equal and coordinate avenue for having zoning change discussions. So I appreciate how we could do this. I prefer somebody else being the lead. Again, these are simply my opinions, speaking for myself. Susan, yes, go ahead.
Hi. Again, I think that, and maybe it's my fault, I think that you're misconstruing my move or my request as support. It has nothing to do with that. What I don't want to happen is, I do not want to be printed in the warrant that says we just couldn't make a decision because we hadn't heard from the planning board. I know that's not the wording that's going to be used.
That's not what it would say.
But
that is not what it would say. What it would say is that your in essence characterization, I think, is inaccurate. What it would say is we are waiting. We're waiting until town meeting.
And I understand that. I just said that. I said, I know this is not what it would say, but that's in essence what it is. We didn't make a decision because we didn't have enough information. My point is as this board, if we do not have the information prior to when the warrant needs to be printed, then it should be IP'd. That is my opinion on it. We cannot say that something should be passed, but we're going to wait and discuss it at the meeting once we've heard from someone else who isn't the one who was putting the article forth to begin with. If we can't make a decision on it because we don't have enough time to ask the experts and do enough research on it, then we should IP it. I do not think that it should be discussed at town meeting, nor do I think it should be printed in the warrant that we could not or did not or were not able to, however you want to word it, make the decision in time for the warrant to be printed. We've actually had an extra month and a half, and I understand that things changed, and I understand that Mrs. Whitney just brought this to us, but our job is to make decisions in a timely manner. If that cannot be done, we are to give the people in the warrant the information. If we cannot do that, and then we're relying on everyone to attend the meeting to hear the discussions, I have a problem with that. So either I move to vote, not because I personally believe this should be passed, because I actually believe it should not go in the warrant, that we did not make a decision in time. So as this advisory committee, you should either vote yes or no. If you vote no, then it would in essence be postponed. Or make a
If you
motion to
vote no,
indefinitely
then there
postpone
would
it.
still need to be a motion. Or you can make a motion to then say what I know that you object to the most, at least if I understand you correctly, is we're going to postpone making a decision until town meeting. So again, those are the three
I
options.
object
But
to
currently we are, understood. Okay, so I think we have the issues aired. If there's, I see no other hands up. Okay, so I will call the vote. So again, the vote is, do we approve the citizens petition? And I will call the vote. We will go, let's go reverse alphabetically. I'm feeling dangerous tonight. Okay, Kiara Moore. Yes, your vote, please.
Yes.
Kiara votes yes to approve. Mr. Lutz is not here. Susan Klein? Are you on mute, Susan? Or?
No, I'm thinking because I wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
ready.
Okay, sorry.
Like I said, I wasn't making this motion because I wanted it to go one way or the other. I'm going to vote. I am going to vote yes because I'm going to vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Jackie Katz.
I'm voting yes.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that was a yes, correct?
Yep, correct. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, breaking up a little bit. Mike Huff.
Voting no.
Arthur Franzak, I, the chairman, vote no. Brian Bichkowski.
I vote no. I'd like to hear what the board or the planning board says.
Okay, thank you. Kristen Balish.
Yes.
Okay, so I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes for yes and 1, 2, 3 votes for no. So the citizens petition will be put down as having the advisory board approval. Okay, so that is taken care of.
Thank you very much.
And Susan Jacobson, I see we have some people in the lobby. Did you also get, Susan Jacobson, the what you needed to in terms of recording the vote?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I don't want to overwhelm you here. Okay, so thanks to everyone who participated in that. We will now move on to the budget discussion, which is next on our agenda. Okay. Petition budget, just making sure we're taking care of things. Okay, now Blythe, would you like to introduce, and I don't know if you share your screen, perhaps Katie, can you make Blythe a co-host? If you are listening, would appreciate that. Thank you.
Arthur, it will take
Blythe now has the power.
to get back to my, it will take me a little bit to get back into my, into the town website to get all those. So if someone else has got them, it might be a better.
Okay,
play.
sure. Well,
Sorry, I
do have them
didn't know you wanted me to do that.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sort of calling you quickly here. Hang on, I can share it.
Okay.
Let me pull this up.
Why don't I start off by
Okay, here
just
we
giving
go.
you an overview and then Todd to jump in because he's done, you know, the actual number crunching work. There you go, perfect. So after last meeting, the understanding that we had was that you wanted to see a budget that was approximately 1.5% increase. And that's what this document represents. As we talked about at that meeting, we have made the adjustment downwards for the King Philip School District reduction of about 113,000 and reduced the MEC by 3/4 of the assessment for next year, leaving 1/4 in. These are reductions from the, the original 2.43% budget. So what the effect of that is we needed to adjust revenues. And so we've done that. So the budget actually went up from where the selectmen were at 0.13 to where you had directed us, you wanted to look at an increase of 1.5%. So that's kind of the overview. That's what we attempted to accomplish. And what I'd like to do is ask Todd to go over with you what adjustments he made in revenue, so you just understand what those look like.
Sounds great. Try to make this as large as I can. Okay.
So a couple of adjustments on
Todd,
the revenues.
Go ahead.
Bear with me for 1 sec. I got to get the other screen.
No problem.
One more second. Okay, so let's see if I can get you back. Okay, so looking at the budget that you have with the revenue page, some of the adjustments that I made would be reduction of the new growth number from 600,000 to 550. Motor vehicle excise, that was originally slated at $2 million. We moved that down 50,000 to $1,950,000. The penalties, interest, and taxes was 120. Moved that down to 110. The transfer station revenue was originally budgeted on the one you saw before, 310,000. Now it's at 300,000. Fees were at 20,000. They're at now 17,500. And let's see. The license and permits moved down 10,000 from 440 to 430. And the meals tax, we reduced that by 5,000 from 85 to 80,000. And then we also reduced the non-recurring or prison mitigation from 250 down to 150. And then I adjusted some of the state aid a little bit down, made it flat for the Chapter 70 money, down from the 3,489,705 originally proposed, as well as the what they used to call lottery or general revenues that the state gives us, unrestricted funds now. Originally budgeted at $1,046,000 down to $975,000. And I think the state-owned land reduced from 225 to 217. Brings us down from 41,191,364 originally to 40,793,000. And that includes a reduction on the free cash usage from 124,679 to 83,304 in totality. Needed to reduce that revenue to balance the budget to get to balanced budget. Again, going back to what Blythe indicated with the reduced expenses for King Philip assessment, about 113,000, and then also the assessment for the MEC, reducing that 1/4 of the assessment for the budget in next year. And then taking those two factors into consideration, if you scroll down on your page, Arthur, probably to the last portion where we get into the summary of the budget. If you keep scrolling down, I think it's going to be page 10. Arthur, page 10.
Okay, I think I'm on page 10 now. Nope, it's cultural and
My
recreation.
screen looks like page 6.
This is page 10.
Yep. So bottom line works out to be a 1.5% increase there on the right-hand side. Oh, go back up a little bit. So overall, all in is 43,588,308, as you guys had requested for the budget.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for putting this together. We will take questions. Do folks have questions for Todd or Blythe on the budget? Again, this is the approximately a 1.5% budget. Questions and discussion. And okay, Susan, yes, go ahead.
Well, actually, I was going to wait for someone else, but since no one raised their hands, first, thank you, Todd and Blythe, for listening to us last week and going and making the changes. I would just like to put this in layman's terms because, as you can see, there are a significant amount of people who have joined the call tonight who are very, very curious about how we're going to move forward. So, just for clarification purposes, if you could, in sort of layman's terms, non-accountant speak, we originally voted down the 0.13 budget, which was a $983,000 cut split between the town and the schools. To get back to 1.5, which is what we asked you to do, which would have been the original 2.4 budget minus the portion of the MEC money and various other things to get you down to 1.5. What did you save and or cut specifically without having to go through a spreadsheet? Let me word that differently. Other than the MEC money, we had told you we were going to leave it up to you of how you got to the 1.5. I'm assuming that the schools and the town budget were restored, at least in legalese speak. Where did you find the savings, I guess is the correct way to phrase that.
Where did you find the savings?
Again,
Yes, Todd or Blythe? Todd or Blythe, yes.
Including.
We made two adjustments. We reduced the MEC by 3/4 of the assessment. So instead of 380,000, it says 95,000 in the budget, a couple pages back. And we reduced the King Philip budget by just under 113,000, so that their overall increase next year would be a 2.5% increase instead of 3.5%. And we did that because the other two towns are on the same plan to fund KP at the 2.5% increase of their share. So those are the two reductions that we made, but we had to make corresponding revenue adjustments to add the revenue back from 0.13% budget in order to get back up to 1.5%. And so that's what Todd went through a little earlier, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the way, just to follow up, Arthur, the way that you were able to structure it is without using stabilization funds right now and reserving the stabilization fund should further cuts be made.
But the part that, I think where if this is the budget that advisory is interested in recommending, it makes different assumptions about revenue the town will receive from local receipts or state. They will be greater than what the selectmen's budget shows.
Correct. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I have more questions. Jonathan Hurwitz, yes, sir, please.
My question was just addressed, actually, so I'm good for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Mike Hoff, yes, sir.
Same. I want to know where the additional.
Oh, wow, okay. That was a mighty exchange. Very good, very good. Okay, one question, one clarification that I have. So Blythe, and I'm trying to phrase this correctly, this 1.5% budget has, shall we say, more generous assumptions about revenue in it than the 0.13.
That's correct. I mean, the sense of what I heard last week, so correct Todd and I if I'm wrong, is that overall a majority on advisory felt that the revenue picture from the state was not going to be as what's the right word? Challenging, bleak.
Dire, yes.
Dire, thank you. Than what we had put forth and the select board had adopted. So I think we didn't attempt to make any other adjustments to any other line items in school or town side expenses or salaries. We simply adjusted revenues upwards to get to back to 1.5%.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification. Jonathan, yes, you have a question.
Sorry, I did re-raise my hand. So if we were to go forward with this budget and the revenue projections fall short of what's required for this budget, I presume the shortfall would be funded from stabilization. And if that's the case, I mean, I guess maybe my question is how much money out of stabilization would need to come if the revenue projections were equivalent to the original budget, but we had the spending of this new one? What dollar figure would get drawn down from stabilization to fill the gap?
Well,
Does that make sense, Blythe, the question?
I wouldn't necessarily suggest it would come from stabilization. I think as I recall, both Ingrid Alardi and I and Dr. Zinni saying last week, our plan is to, if this is the budget that you present and it's the one that the voters choose at town meeting, we're not planning to spend to this level. We're planning to spend to the level that the select board is proposing, because all three of us, for slightly different reasons, are very concerned that the revenue picture will not be as like this budget in front of you. And so if we haven't spent the money, then in the fall, we'd be able to simply adjust those budget line items downwards, and that's how we'd make up the gap. As the town administrator, my recommendation would be that we don't touch stabilization or free cash until it's a last resort. If the state revenues are even much worse than we planned now. Todd and I spent a lot of time in rating agency update meetings this past week, and we're really pleased that the town's bond ratings have been affirmed, although with a negative outlook. And part of that negative outlook is due to the state of the economy right now, but both agencies would like to see the town's reserves increased, one by a little, one by quite a lot. And so we take that seriously and would not want to see our situation change in that area. So we would not recommend it at this time.
Okay, a quick follow-up if I can. I understand that.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I understand that position. So let me ask this. Do you have a definition of what we're facing? What does last resort mean? What does the revenue, like if you had to quantify it, if we're planning on X from revenue from the state, what percentage of that would have to come in for you to define it as, in your opinion, qualifying to use stabilization funds? Is it 90% of it? Is it 50%? The whole purpose, we discussed this last time, of what's the point of having a rainy day fund if we don't use it when it's raining? I'm trying to understand, by your definition, when is it raining? What is the definition of last resort when we would consider using stabilization?
I don't have an exact definition to give you. I just, I would warn again that using a one-time revenue like stabilization just means that you've balanced the budget this year, but then you've created a structural deficit in the following year. And that's why, and another reason why it's frowned upon to do that, because it just makes that hurdle that much harder to get over in the following year. And you're hopefully then trying to also find money to put it back at stabilization. So, if we haven't made these, if the portion of the budget that we haven't cut so far, for town, 205,000 and Norfolk schools 285, and we have not used that money towards even if it was approved at town meeting, that's where some adjustments could be made. I think if all revenues are even below that, then I think it's a conversation that should be had about whether stabilization should be at that time or whether the town would rather see further cuts and reduced services. I know I'm dancing around it, Jonathan, but I don't think it's up to me to make those kind of judgment. I can only offer recommendations and what I think is a best practice for the town to follow.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps I can ask a clarifying question. So it seems as though, Blythe, you don't see this as a rainy day fund. Basically, what you're saying is this is a kind of one-time, one-off emergency where this spend is going to have an immediate and one-time impact. And if you use quote unquote stabilization funds, given their size relative to the problem, it's like, I can't really say that, a drop in the bucket, okay? A drop in the bucket, which isn't really going to be meaningful in trying to address a larger structural deficit. So rainy day fund, well, it's more of a one-time thing. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. Okay, I see next, and okay, that was Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. Susan, yes, go ahead.
Hi. First off, would you mind muting Mrs. Whitney? I think she may have walked away from her computer but left her sound on, and there's a lot of background noise.
Done.
Okay. There are a lot of people on this
And
call.
you get a follow-up question. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Go ahead.
There are a lot of people, as I can see, that are on this call that were not on the call last week, so they are not necessarily privy to all of the discussions. They may have heard things through the grapevine. So I just want to be clear about what at least my point of asking for this budget was. Blythe and Ingrid and Paul have all stated that they are going to proceed with the less dramatic cuts that they were able to find, even if we pass this. And some people have been saying, well, then why are you passing it? Because there was also an ask by Dr. Alardi for a request for the select board to please vote to restore this in the fall, should it come in. And what happens in that situation is it has to go for vote. Same as it does for stabilization funds, same as it does for everything else. By creating this 1.5% budget versus the 0.13, what that does is the schools and the town are already going to make their cuts, but it creates what some may call fluff, though it's not fluff because it is what they were owed to begin with and what they were due, and what was approved originally. It is creating a cushion, so to speak, in their budget so that if the money doesn't come in and they are asked in the fall to make further cuts, they actually have the flexibility to do that. If they are asked to make cuts in the fall and they don't have any flexibility in their budget to lay off, to get a $50,000, $100,000 cut, they would have to lay off 2 employees because they have to pay for unemployment insurance. So I just want to make that clear to the people on this call that even though Blythe has said she's still moving forward with her cuts for now, and so are Ingrid and Paul, by approving this budget, we are giving them the flexibility to restore their budget in the fall if the state aid comes in. But if the state aid doesn't come in, or further cuts are needed, it is giving them the cushion to make those cuts without having to even further in October make cuts to their budgets and to their staff. So I just want to make that clear.
I understand. If I can just interrupt. So you've made a lot of points. That's good. Blythe, any comments on that, on the characterization?
I think Susan has stated it accurately.
Excellent. Okay, sorry, Susan. Please continue.
That's okay. There seems to be about almost 35, 40 people here, and they're different from they were last week. And I can see that there are a few of our local teachers. So I just want to be clear about what the advisory board is asking. And I also want to be clear for any citizens who are on here who may oppose it, may support it, about why we're doing it. We're not, as a board, just looking to spend money where money doesn't need to be spent. We are actually looking to protect the schools and the police and the DPW and the fire department further should more cuts need to come in. And this is the budget that was originally approved, by our town and our select board. And throughout this whole zero-based budgeting process, we came up with 2.4. So this is meeting it in the middle and making sure there's some cushion should further cuts need to come in. And should they not need to come in, then the money is already there to restore their budget.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, yes, you had a question.
I just want to make sure I understood something from last week correctly as well. Again, given how many people are on the call, is so if we were to, advisory were to put through this as our recommendation and the money did come through in the fall, right from the state, it would kind of be already budgeted in advance, so we know where it goes. And I think
At least
one difference,
like some of it, at least some of it, yes.
right. So if we went with the
it could be even more.
0.13, yeah, if we went with the 0.13 version, and then the money came in excess of that more conservative revenue picture, any amount that came in above that would be subject to kind of how the select board determined it should be spent and allocated. Is that correct?
Blythe,
So
I
what
think that
the
question's
select
to you.
board did last week was to vote to say that if the revenue targets were met, they would, we plan to restore the funds, and that would be done through them putting forth article to the fall town meeting to adjust the budget by the amounts in the various accounts back upwards again.
Right, but that would not be, that's more, they would get to decide kind of how that was distributed versus this being decided kind of at this point.
Well, they would, and then as you're doing right now, advisory would have the opportunity to, to have its position on it as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
which
just wanted to clarify
is a
the
point.
process, if it would be different, and in what way would it be different? Thank you.
One point, Kristen, thanks for asking the question. One point, Kristen and Blythe, that I want to kind of point out is we are going to get a second bite at this apple. And I think Blythe just pointed that out. When we do, and I know that on the one hand, I think there's the perspective that, and for folks on the call, so the 0.13% is what we talked a lot about last time. I know we then asked for a less pessimistic budget of 1.5%. And the idea being, as I think Susan put it, use the word cushion, which I thought was nice, like a buffer. So being a little bit more generous means that there is a built-in buffer into folks' budget. However, let's say the revenue projections come in even better than that. I mean, there was still money that we would want to put back. I mean, what I'm just saying is, I think there's going to be a putback decision. The odds of us getting this accurate, yeah. So that's my kind of question about a lot of this is.
Arthur,
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, there wouldn't
Yes,
be,
Susan, go ahead.
because this is actually this. I know what it looks like, and it can be kind of hard to understand without attending all of every single meeting. There wouldn't be additional to put back. This is the original. What I think people are misunderstanding is this is the original 2.4 budget. It's just we took out the MEC money, and then she increased some things in different places to equal what we had discussed to make it a 1.5. It's really the original 2.4, which is what the schools, police, fire asked for. So there wouldn't be additional. If any additional state aid came in that we weren't expecting, say from COVID or FEMA, or the state doesn't give you more money than you're entitled to. This is the money that we're entitled to. I think what it's doing is it's placing the faith now that we're going to get it, but having a cushion if we don't. There is that ability to make those cuts should it not come in. I think that there is not a ton of faith in the various people and boards and citizens that the money would get restored, because there is such a huge push to make budget cuts that this is just the way of basically holding them at their word without actually giving them the chance to be held at their word. We are having the original 2.4 minus the MEC money, minus the 3/4 of the MEC money. So there wouldn't be additional to restore. If more money from the state comes in, it would have had a purpose. It would have a place it goes. So, and then also we wouldn't in the fall then have to vote to restore and also vote where it goes. And then there would be lots of meetings on who gets what percentage and et cetera. We're saying you're getting the original budget. It's just there's cushion because they're still going to make their cuts, but now they have that cushion. If it comes
Understood. So I think to some of your points, I think that and this is just my perspective, just a member of the committee here. I see town leadership trying to come together. We're talking about the schools. We're talking about Blythe and her team. Town leadership is trying to come together and say, look, there's an emergency which requires some shared sacrifice. And I believe Blythe is currently in negotiations with various unions and such about this. And everyone is trying to coalesce around a certain level of sacrifice represented in the 0.13% budget that we discussed last time. That's the number that, based on my understanding, that people are shooting for. And what we are basically saying is, well, you're probably not going to need it. Not going to need it. It's too pessimistic. What concerns me is I want to address the risk of the pandemic, and that seems to be getting confused with the risk of the budget being cut by for the schools and such. So I appreciate, yes, there are people who want the budget to go down, and I appreciate the concern that maybe those people will opportunistically use this particular emergency to then try to get more cuts than they normally would. But again, town leadership has rallied around a particular position. I think voting for ultimately what they're asking for, the 0.13, trying to support something like that, to me, is a vote of confidence in a time where we're trying to have some leadership. And I don't understand if we could ask for shared sacrifice when we're saying that that's not necessary. I just worry about the conflicting signals. I do appreciate the sort of inside pool about, well, but separate from the whole pandemic thing, there's this ongoing issue about, funding and trying to reduce it in schools and such, but that's not, to me, that's not the issue before us. I worry about confusing the two. And to me, I'm much more concerned about the risk of the pandemic than the risk of people coming to town meeting or the select board not voting something that they said they would. Really, that's more of a concern to us to make the budget more generous than the pandemic. So anyway, that's just my chance at the mic. I believe Mike was next. Yes, Mike, go ahead.
So just to be additive, I agree with those points. I don't like the budget game playing. The town should do what the town needs to do. I also heard all three parties last week say that they're planning not to use the money. That's not, so it's a budget. It feels like a budget gaming for next year. And I feel like we could address it in the fall. We could address it next year. In a large way, these are magic numbers. This budget works because Todd added more revenue, and so I don't see how this gets us further ahead. I much rather, as Arthur just said, not being additive but repeating, I much rather be aligned with what the Board of Selectmen is saying, or the Select Board, sorry, and not do the gaming. We're doing the same thing as in special education, and all these things are important, and I don't think that their forces aligned to hurt the town.
Okay, thank you very much for your perspective. Susan, you are next. Yes, please.
Okay, when you said that that it's a more generous budget, that's actually incorrect. It's the appropriate budget for what they asked for. This cut came in after. And I think that's what people are forgetting. We're not saying we're taking the proposed budget and throwing a lot more money at you just for no reason at all. They made $1 million cut that is incongruent with what the schools and the town needed. So they were forced to make cuts to find this $1 million. We're not saying we're giving you more money. We're being more generous and we're just throwing money at a problem. We're actually saying that we are logically speaking about where a cut could be made to meet in the middle with this $1 million. So it's not so detrimental, right? So we're not being more generous in giving them money. And to say that that they said they're not using the money, that's actually not true. What they said was, because they are uncertain and because of the way their unemployment plans are structured, they cannot wait until the fall to make cuts. So it's not that they're not going to use the money. The money will be in their budget and will be there for them to use for what they need it for. How they use it is still up to them. So both Ingrid and Paul and Blythe said they will continue with the conservative cuts they are making right now while keeping the money in their budget so that in September, prior to November's town meeting, if the money from the state has come in, then they are able to restore things in September. You have to understand, we can't vote to restore their budget until November. This is not something that can be done in the fall. November is the end of the fall, is the beginning of the winter. So this is something that would be almost too late in some aspects for them to do when you're speaking about the schools. Obviously with police and fire department and DPW, those can be restored at any time. But it's not that they're not using it. It's just that they're asking to keep it as a cushion because they want to continue with these cuts until September. And then should the state aid come in, then they will feel more comfortable about restoring those non-teaching, non-September jobs that they could restore in September or October versus having to make further cuts or having to make cuts where they would need to pay unemployment and change teaching structure at that point. So I think we should be clear.
Which is the cushion? Which is the cushion? Yes.
Okay, I think we should be clear in our words that we're using. To say things are more generous makes it sound like we're just willy-nilly giving money, or to say that they're not going to use it is also incongruous. That's not the case. So let's make sure that whether you support this or you don't support this, as you told me last week, Arthur, let's make sure that we're using the right terminology, because sometimes the terminology that we're using can sway someone's opinion on this, and that's not really what we're trying to do here.
Agreed. I completely agree. And to respond to some of those clarifications, I believe that the 1.5% budget is more generous than the 1.3. That is correct.
Right, but the 0.13 is not the original budget that the schools.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said. I said we have two things that we're considering. There's 1.5 and there's 1.3. 1.5 is more generous than 1.3. So that is accurate. And my recollection is very different about what the folks from the schools had said. However, folks, again, we're all hearing information. We all have to make our best decisions. Jonathan, yes, sir, you're waiting for the next question.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm sorry if this sounds like I'm beating the same dead horse, but with some of the comments going on, I actually want to espouse for a third position, because I think the comments I've heard don't accurately reflect my position on this. I'm trying to think about this not of what's going to happen for this school year. For example, I know there's more than just the schools, right? There's fire and police. So forgive me for using the term school, but I'm less concerned about what's going to happen for this upcoming budget year and more about what's going to happen and what we're setting ourselves up for on a long-term basis. We've seen this story play out before, right? When we made all the cuts in 2008, whatever it was, it took however many years, 5 years, to get back up to that level of service that we started at 2008, right? And took us X number of years to reclaim that. So if we take a budget cut for schools, for police, for fire, the same thing's going to happen. No one in a year from now is going to support an override, right? When we're trying to restore things, we're not going to be able to fully restore where we were. We're not going to be able to, in a 1 year period, restore back to this 2.4% budget. It's going to take many years to get back to that level of service. So the services that our town has delivered in the schools, in the police, and in the fire, the decision we're making right now is not, we can't think of this as a 1 year decision and we'll, good times will be here next year. Even if good times are back next year, this is going to take many years to catch back up, because again, there won't be the appetite for an override. So the reason I'm saying my opinion kind of is different, I realize what we're offered here is not what I'm about to advocate for. So I realize we can't vote on this, but I will say my commentary is this is what a stabilization fund is for, right? This is unlike the housing crisis of 2008, where there was, we could have a debate on whether the economy has been a shell game to begin with, but let's assume that it's not. And the economy was healthy prior to the virus. And that once we kind of work through the new normal, the economy will rebound. So I think the financial predicament we're in is we're probably in for the next year. And I would hope and expect, and I realize it's optimistic, it should rebound a year from now and we'll be kind of back in business. To me, that is the textbook definition of what a stabilization fund is there. It is a rainy day fund. This, if we are able to apply some stabilization funds, and I'm sorry if I'm being dismissive of what that might do to our bond rating of going from AAA plus to whatever is less than that, right? So be it. Like I'd rather have us take that hit to our stabilization fund once, try and maintain level service in all areas, the school, the fire, the police, right? So next year and for many years after, we're not trying to catch back up over a longer period of time. So again, I understand that's not what has been presented here, but that's kind of why I asked the questions before is I mean, honestly, I really struggle to understand the purpose of a stabilization fund because that we have. It just seems to me that the only value of having it is for our bond rating and not for actually using it to try and fill a budget shortfall like this that we're faced with. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen in a year. Things could get totally off the rails. The state revenue could dry up. I mean, if those things happen, whether or not we have the 0.083 or the 1.5 or the 2.4, it doesn't really matter. We're all going to be in a mess and we're all going to go through real hard conversations, right? But I do advocate for the perspective of if the economy can recover in a year, the stabilization fund is our best means to get us through this period.
So Jonathan, a couple questions to clarify. So I know you didn't quite say it this way, but so I think perhaps what you're saying, or part of what you're saying is the shock that we're talking about from an economic perspective. One way to approach it is this has a high likelihood, in your view, of being kind of a one-time thing. So it's not really a systemic year over year over year over year. Therefore, that would qualify more to then use a one-time source of revenue like the stabilization fund.
Yep, agreed. And one other thing specific to this budget, I mean, what I would personally advocate for is I'm a proponent of the 1.5% budget, but I'm also a proponent of finding that revenue or finding that money from the stabilization fund and not gaming the revenue numbers, right? I would take a conservative approach on what the revenue is going to be. I think it's going to be terrible, or I'm sorry, the state aid. I think it's going to be terrible is the reality. So I don't think it's the best approach to just cross fingers and hope that it'll be more to get us to the 1.5. Yet I still support trying to get to this 1.5 budget to support that level of service to the town, fund it 1 year from the stabilization fund, and then they'll let the chips fall where they may a year from now. Because again, we can't predict what's going to happen with the economy or the virus or revenues or any of those sorts of things. But I think using a rainy day fund for it's raining pretty hard to at the very least help protect us from a prolonged and multi-year hole that we'd have to dig out of is a prudent approach.
Okay, thank you. Now, one thing I know there's some hands up and I do want to get especially to Todd, but prior to that, as people know, I like to kind of characterize the horses that we're sort of voting for here. So I know there's the 0.13, then there's the 1.5, which is the large discussion today is about the 1.5. If I understand you correctly, Jonathan, if you could ideally vote for something, you would vote for the 1.5 with the modification of instead of the additional funds being brought in through just more generous revenue assumptions, you would like to then see stabilization explicitly used for that purpose to get us to 1.5.
Correct.
Now, I have a procedural question. So Blythe and Todd, is that something that we can request? We would like to see a budget with that specific revenue source, those line items drawn from those sources.
Yeah, so to answer Jonathan's question from earlier with respect to what would be the impact to the stabilization fund with making the changes to the revenues as originally proposed in the select board's recommended budget, that obviously would be $490,000. And that's the town portion of the 205 and the school portion of the 285, because we've already backed out the KP. They're not going to get that. And then we also made the adjustment with the MEC. So that would leave us with a differential of $490,000. So that's what we would have to make up, whether it's some from free cash, some from stabilization, but the number, call it 500,000 as a magic number in order to get a balanced budget to you.
Jonathan, did you have follow-up to that? Or
no, I'm sorry, I know I should know. Can you just remind me what's the total amount in the stabilization fund? What percentage of that would the 400K represent?
We have 1.7 million.
Okay. If I could add just one item.
Yes, Blythe, please.
I think it's just, I would also remind people that use of stabilization would mean that the budget would have to pass by a 2/3 vote rather than a 1/3 vote.
Higher bar.
And I would like to add one other point on stabilization. If it's going to be used, I would much rather see it go to something that was a one-time cost, like there were, COVID-19 costs that don't get covered by some other source that we had to deal with that we thought were hopefully never going to happen again or not in a really long time. That to me would be a better use of it rather than a recurring cost like salaries or the expenses we need in the budget. I think it would make budgeting in future years, as Jonathan points out, I agree with you that that's a challenge. I think that would help put this town in just an overall better financial position.
Understood. Although I think to Jonathan's point, I think that way of looking at it is saying that it actually is more of a one-time cost than a recurring, the whole pandemic thing. That to look at it as a endemic thing like the prior examples from this perspective is to say that's not what people believe or saying that the evidence points to. So
that's one. I'm sorry to jump in.
No, go ahead.
I agree. I'm not advocating that we drain stabilization dry and we're down to zero and no longer have a rainy day fund. I don't recommend that at all. I'm just looking at this I realize it's crossing fingers, but if we're hoping the economy will recover in 12 months and that we're hoping not to continue to need stabilization funds, but it would have been a boat that, carried us through the storm, excuse me, for this year without, again, using 25% of what we have in stabilization seems reasonable to me in terms of admittedly, but optimistically preventing us from a multi-year kind of crawl out of a hole for getting back to the services
Okay, so I would like to, hang on. Sorry, Kristen, you had a question. Yes, please.
Yeah, I want to kind of just add that I kind of support that approach. I think that I'm not super comfortable with the more optimistic revenue numbers. I think that is too optimistic from everything I know through my work and through people I talk to and the experts we've heard from. So I don't support kind of the budget with the increased revenue side. I would support similarly a 1.5 if we could kind of figure out a way to fund it differently, or I would support the 0.13. But I feel a little bit uncomfortable kind of being so optimistic on the revenue side.
Understood, which leads me to just want to regroup here and say, okay, so conceptually, there's the 1.3, there's the 1.5 revenue, which is what I'm calling that. Then there's the 1.5 stabilization. And if I understood you correctly, Todd, the third 1.5 use of stabilization budget would be a drawdown of approximately $400,000 from the stabilization fund, correct?
We could use the cash though, right? Is that the other option for a portion of that?
We'd only be able to use $300,000 of the current free cash because we can't use free cash that's not certified.
So I think you corrected me and said 490, Todd?
That is correct.
Okay, so roughly 500,000. I'm calling it stabilization. I'll just call it cash. Okay, so again, there's 1.5 revenue and there's 1.5 cash. In the interest of just trying to get the sense of where people are, I'd love to get a motion from someone. And again, we're not voting on an article. There seems to be some confusion about this. I'm trying to understand direction. So is there an interest in using stabilization? So I would love to get a vote if there's a majority vote of people who are interested in conceptually using stabilization to approximately to the tune that we're talking about. To Jonathan's point, we're not looking to bleed it dry, but just making a sizable, but still not the entire enchilada withdrawal. I would love to get a sense of people's idea on that.
Arthur?
Yes, Susan.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Yes.
Susan, other Susan.
Yes.
Are we allowed to, or I guess Blythe maybe, are we allowed to pass the 1.5 budget? Obviously we don't know pass, but at town meeting, can we, if it passes this evening, or it doesn't, and some citizen brings this forward, if the 1.5 budget passes at town meeting, it needs 50% if it does not contain stabilization, correct?
Correct.
Can we then,
Correct.
Can we pass the 1.5 and then immediately request either through citizen or through someone on the advisory board as a citizen, however we want to look at it, then pass the use of stabilization funds with the 2/3, or do they need to be voted on together?
I would want advice from town council, but my initial reaction is they need to be voted on together.
Todd, you also had a comment, I think. You're muted, Todd.
Sorry.
No problem.
So with respect to the budget would have to be voted on at town meeting, as is with the revenues and not utilizing stabilization funds. You would need a simple majority. If we were to put the stabilization fund as a budget item, the budget would have to be voted in total with a 2/3 majority vote. If you choose to not include the stabilization fund at the annual town meeting, obviously, if the revenues are short at the fall town meeting, you can then make a request for stabilization funds to provide for the shortfall as another option. And at that meeting, again, you still need the 2/3 vote for those monies.
And you're talking about fall town meeting, correct, Todd?
Correct.
Which is kind of what I meant by the second bite at the apple. Susan, yes, go ahead. Sorry, Susan Jacobson. Yes, you had a question.
So I have a question as Susan Jacobson, the resident, not Susan Jacobson on the advisory board. And maybe Blythe can answer this because I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, but at the select board meeting, when they re-voted to agree to restore the budget in the fall, if things were not as dire as predicted or better than predicted, I believe one of the select board members, and I'm not 100% sure, which is why I'm reaching out to Blythe, mentioned that even if they voted to restore funding, a citizen could come to the town meeting floor and vote to not restore the funding completely back to each department. And I just wanted to know if I did hear that correctly. And is that's, I think maybe I'm hearing part of Susan's point of view as being, if we vote this now, then we don't have to go back to town meeting. So that's my question. Maybe Blythe could answer that for us.
That would be handled by the moderator if someone wanted to try and put another motion on the floor during the meeting to change something from what the original motion is.
Right, but was that said after the vote that a citizen could?
I think so, but I have to go back and watch the tape.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I also don't know about this may also be a Jay question, Tollerman, our moderator. I mean, based on my conversations with him, we can put forward a budget as the first motion. And this is, I think we're all talking about Article 3, if I am correct. That's the budget article, Blythe?
5.
I'm sorry, 5. Okay, so when Article 5 comes up, we can submit what we're talking about here, like what we agree to, we can submit it. I just always have the impression that if that's voted down, well then, you know, the budget that the select board had proposed would then get moved to then get voted on and then approved. I don't think we can just kind of keep going until we get something passed. I think that that others will have a chance to then make motions as well. I know that's not very specific, but so like I'd like our kind of one shot at the apple to be something that we're all as together on as possible. Susan Klein brings up the point about using stabilization does have a greater procedural risk. Yes, so it's much harder to get 2/3 of a vote than half a vote, which is why I'd like to try to have a motion where, and perhaps Jonathan, if given that the use of stabilization fund is something that you've articulated, perhaps a motion about, does the advisory board wishes to consider the use of stabilization for this year's budget or some such thing? Because I would like to get a reading as to people, whether they would like to consider the stabilization and the extra margin of the vote, or if we just stick with the original 1.5.
Okay, I make a motion to take a poll on consideration of the use of stabilization funds to meet the 1.5% budget.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Who seconded it?
Susan.
Oh, thanks, Susan. Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second. Now, any discussion about this? Just to be clear, a vote in favor of this means yes, we are going to spend time crafting a 1.5% budget, which relies upon stabilization funds. Voting against it means no, don't want to go that path. We're going to not touch stabilization, at least not currently. Okay, so any questions about what's before people? Kiara, yes, please.
Thanks. I think I generally agree that stabilization should be used for a one-time expense. And I just worry that I agree that COVID has been unprecedented, but I don't think that we've seen the last of it. And so I just worry that we may be dipping into it too early if we move this forward.
Understood. Thank you. Other comments or questions that people have? Brian, yes, sir.
That was along my same line of thinking, but to be a little bit additive to it, it is, my question is, can we, I guess we can, I would not be in favor of using those particular funds to address something that we don't even know is an expense yet. The basic premise is we don't believe that we won't get the state aid, so we can go ahead and pass this higher budget, but if we don't get the state aid, we'll have moved the money out of the stabilization fund to support it. But that's like betting on the come not coming in, which the budget bets on the come coming in. So it just seems a little bit at odds, and I'm not sure releasing stabilization funds for a potential revenue shortfall is a wise decision. Fully acknowledging that's not a question.
Okay, no, this is also discussion time. Susan, yes, please go ahead.
Though I don't have an issue with using stabilization funds, and I agree with Jonathan wholeheartedly that if you aren't going to use your rainy day fund in what is essence a monsoon, when are you going to use it? I believe the focus at town meeting should be focused on passing one of the two budgets. It should either be the 0.13 or the 1.5. And though, yes, I do support the 1.5, clearly, I'm the one that brought it. I also support wholeheartedly that a budget be a consensus that is passed, and clouding the vote with needing it to also have people decide if they want to use stabilization or they don't. Maybe they support 1.5, but they don't support stabilization. Maybe they support using that, but they don't. Do you see what I'm saying? I think that should be concise on what we're doing at town meeting. So even though I do agree with Jonathan and that I would like Blythe to double check, but I believe based on our conversations that we've had with Jay Tellerman and conversations we've had in the past, we can vote for this and then move on town meeting as citizens or as someone from the advisory board and request that Jay Tellerman present the option of stabilization funds either then or call a special town meeting for it in the fall should it be necessary. Again, I'm voting with the idea that it's not going to be necessary. So I guess my point is I want to keep the two of them separate. I think they are two completely different topics that people can possibly have polarizing views on, and the budget should be a clean vote. It should be a clean discussion across the board, and it shouldn't be, well, I really want this budget, but I don't want stabilization, or I want stabilization, but I want this budget. And I think it should just remain a clear vote. And I'm almost certain that it can be brought at the summer town meeting, but should we choose not to do that or no one does, we can certainly bring it in the fall to use it at that point should we need it. And that's the whole point. If we don't need it by the fall, then the money doesn't have to be restored, the stabilization doesn't have to be touched, and the schools and the fire and the police and the DPW are all where they were supposed to be with all the hard work they did for the last 7 months trying to get the most accurate budget they could.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just second that and just say that I think we should just go with one or the other. I think at this point, we just aren't going to know what the fall will look like. So you have to either go with what you think now. Is it going to be a more optimistic revenue number or more pessimistic or whatever the right word is? But I think at this point, we kind of have to go with what we think is probably going to happen and what we think should happen. And I also would not want to pre-use a stabilization fund. I think this might get worse before it gets better. I don't think this is a single year event. I know some other people have said that, some people disagree, but I'm in the camp of this might be a multi-year thing we're dealing with. And so I would hesitate to cloud the discussion with kind of how we're funding each budget, and more focus on which budget do we think we should move forward with.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, yes, sir.
Actually, a procedural question, maybe this is for Todd. So imagine we pass this budget relying on the 500K out of stabilization, and then state revenues came in on the high end or higher than expected, such that we actually didn't need the stabilization funds. Can we simply redirect the state aid or other monies back into stabilization?
No, they'd have to run through the process of getting certified through free cash the following year.
Yeah, but I mean, it could be done, just not immediately.
Correct.
Okay.
It'd be basically a 1-year wait.
Okay, so I understand. I guess for Brian, I understand your comment and your point that this is potentially a conflicting type of thing, but I look at this more of like an arbitrage type of situation, right? Maybe that's not the best term, but certainly hedging on this, right? You know, we don't know what the state revenues will be, and we don't know what the state aid will be, but we are hedging our bet against it. And if it turns out that we were wrong on higher revenues, we do take the hit on stabilization, but we minimize the hill to climb up in future years. And if it turns out we're right on higher revenue, higher state aid, higher state revenues, we'll eventually get that money back into the stabilization fund. So I think this is a reasonable hedge.
So actually, I think it's an unreasonable hedge for one reason, which is I think the greater the shortfall this year, the longer the sustained shortfall will be. So if it actually hedges in the wrong direction, where if we need it this year, we shouldn't have spent the money this year because it will become an ongoing expense. So we drain our emergency account because it was what was expected. And if it's shallower this year, it's likely to be a shorter event, in which case we didn't need to release the money from the stabilization fund. So I actually think it's a reverse hedge.
Jonathan, do you have a perspective on that?
I don't disagree with Brian's point. I think that's, are we gambling one way or the other? It's a gamble one way or the other. It can't be predicted. There's a hedge certainly is not without its risks. So I'm not debating that point. It's just a matter of what's our risk tolerance on this.
Okay, very good. Other hands that would like to come up? I feel like a vote is close. I do not see other hands.
Blythe, excuse me, Arthur.
Yes, Susan.
Blythe and I, because we're co-hosts for some reason, can't raise our hand in this meeting.
That's correct. I know.
So that's why we're waving frantically at you.
Sorry, go ahead.
So Blythe is looking to.
Oh, thank you for, yes, Blythe, please go ahead.
I don't want to beat a dead horse on stabilization. I think you all know where I land, but I would agree with Brian, because think of it this way, you know, if we're only able to raise our your budget base by 2.5%, whatever state aid we get and new growth, and we've been fortunate to have new growth be at least $500,000 or more. But I think, you know, to Jonathan's point, the second year is worse than the first year. If, you know, new growth or, you know, housing starts or commercial development, you know, tails off and we don't have that, if we use stabilization to balance our budget this year, then we've got to, then that becomes part of our base. We basically have to hope taxes can go up enough of that next year, plus whatever contracts are and that sort of thing. That's where the mountain gets harder to go over. And that's why I express the anxiety that I do. And I'd say, you know, if we had to use it for a one-time expense, like related to the pandemic that something else doesn't cover, that's why I'd like to wait as long as possible to dip into it. And then if there's, you know, if there's no other way, then yeah, we use it. So I'm sorry to keep being a broken record. I just wanted to add that one point.
Nope, that's good. And we actually have somebody from the public who would like to speak. Ed Haddad, yes, sir, please go ahead and share. You are still muted, sir.
There it goes.
There you go.
Thank you. I guess I have a comment and then a question. I guess the comment about an approved budget, as I understand, approved budget is what ultimately gets approved at town meeting. So we don't have an approved budget. So we throw that term around and it's not, I don't think it's really quite accurate. The closest that we have to an approved, as I understand it, is the budget that the selectmen have recommended, which is the 0.13 budget, as far as I've seen from the meetings that I've attended. So that's the closest to an approved budget is the selectmen's recommended budget. The question I have for Blythe is, Blythe, there's a lot of comments about restoring essential services. I haven't heard of any essential services being cut that you've outlined yet. Have I missed something? Have you detailed specific essential services that are being cut?
I have not.
Thank you. That's all, Arthur. Thank you. I just wanted to make those 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you for contributing. Okay, so I don't see any other hands up. I'll just share a couple comments. I mean, what I do like about the stabilization idea is, to me, I like the frame of mind of we are dealing with a emergency. And given that this is an emergency, stabilization is very much one way of then addressing it. So I definitely prefer the stabilization option as opposed to, I mean, making the revenue projections rosier. That's why we're here, is to, yeah, I just don't, it just doesn't feel to me like yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with that path. So when it comes to stabilization, I do like the clarity of it. Although I know it was suggested that perhaps that's confusing the issue. I disagree. To me, we are in an emergency situation. And to me, the two options which I think use emergency options the best are the 1.3 initially recommended by the select board, or the stabilization options. The in-between option of the 1.5 just based upon rosier revenue projections, it just, again, to me, it feels like an ongoing battle that's been going on for a while and will go on for a while about funding levels, and not necessarily addressing the magnitude of, at least my view, and everyone has different perspectives on this. It just doesn't feel like a response to me to the crisis at hand. But again, that's just me as an individual. All righty, so let's go for the vote. So again, we're doing a roll call vote. A vote of yes means that you favor using stabilization funds, and a no vote means you do not. We will go alphabetically. Kristen Balish.
I'm so sorry, excuse me, Arthur, before you do this.
Oh yes, Susan, yeah, go ahead.
You're just saying that I want to make sure I vote the correct way.
Sure.
You're not saying that you don't ever want to use stabilization. You're simply voting yes, you want them combined, or no, you do not want them combined.
I believe
You can
understood.
vote 1.5 and then make a motion for stabilization. So I just want to say, are you asking us to use stabilization in general, or you're just to combine stabilization?
Right, so correct. No, I am not talking about the combination question. I'm just saying, do we consider spending more time, which we don't have a ton of? You know, we have a limited amount of time between now and when we have to make our recommendation. Do we want to go down the path of trying to then include it somehow?
Right, so you're asking to include it in
somehow
line item in the budget.
Somehow, we haven't specified how, but somehow, yes. Is it worth us spending more time talking about stabilization, or can we cross that off and get back to earlier options?
Okay.
Okay, Kristen Balish.
No, I do not think we should do stabilization this year.
Thank you. Brian Bichkowski.
No.
I vote no. Michael Huff.
No.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Yes.
Yes. Jackie Katz.
I'm going to vote no, but I agree with a lot of Jonathan's points.
A lot of good points are being made, for sure. Susan Klein.
I'm voting yes, but I'm actually voting yes to use them, but not to use them as part of a line item in the budget. I don't know if you want me to
Understood. David is not with us tonight. Kiara?
No.
Okay, so I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no's and 2 yeses. Is that correct, Susan Jacobson?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion to consider options involving stabilization does not pass. although it was a great discussion, and we may revisit that at the fall for sure. Not for sure, but we may. Okay, so which brings us back to the two horses in contention here. We have an option to talk about the 1.5% budget presented by Blythe and Todd. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, a lot of time has been spent on this. I'm fine with us doing just having a motion to do an up or down vote. Is there more? Are there other options that people really believe that we should consider, or do folks feel comfortable voting? If you feel like that there's other things that need to be discussed, please raise your hand. And it could be just a procedural question.
Then if you're asking for just a procedural question, I have a question.
All questions, but sure, go for it. Mhm.
Okay. I believe, I shouldn't say I believe, from what I understand from Susan is last week we voted down the 0.13. So we don't actually have that as an option on the table tonight. So
I don't believe that that's correct. I do not believe that that's correct. I do not believe that that's correct. I specifically
I asked that last week.
I know, but I asked
Right.
Susan.
Hold on, I'm going to go grab my notes.
Because she said it was voted down. So
I asked specifically for a motion as to what we should consider strategically. I wasn't asking for a motion in terms of us voting on an article.
right, I believe we would have to, I believe, since you said you wanted to, even if it was just a strategical question, I believe we have to vote on the 1.5. If it were to fail, we could entertain a motion of something else, but you're not actually voting between the two again tonight. You're voting on 1.5, and then based on if it passes or if it fails, then someone would have to make a motion because we don't have another option to consider.
Well, I think that another motion would be necessary. That's absolutely true. From my perspective, I'm still hoping that we can consider the 0.13% budget as recommended. Again, I'm asking for votes among us here on Zoom to try to guide the discussion in terms of if we need to just discuss more options or not. I mean, even if we do consider that someone was actually voting on the 0.13 as our official vote on that option, we can still vote to then reconsider.
Okay, excuse me for 1 second. I have in my handwritten notes because I'm not taking notes at the typing notes at the same time as I'm watching. But it said a motion to approve the 0.13 was made by Brian, and it was seconded by Susan, and it was a 5-4 no.
Correct.
That's how that was what I was answering. So
Understood.
it was supported by Brian, Arthur, Mike, and Chiara. It was
Understood.
not
No,
supported
Susan,
by.
got it. Yeah. got
Okay.
it. So we would still, I mean, I'm not sure that that's exactly how it went down, but we can vote to reconsider anyway. So to me, and I believe there's multiple people who at the time discussed about wanting to explore a 1.5% option without necessarily making a final decision on the 0.13. That's one of the things that I'm trying to explore is what the option should be, that people can have an understanding of what all the options are and then picking something. And
Right.
To the point, we are now considering the 1.5% revenue budget with no stabilization. So
Again, procedurally, we are only voting on the 1.5, yes or no. If it
that's
passes,
correct.
that's what we're at. That's what's
And
passed.
yes, and this is not some kind of exploration vote. This is actually voting to recommend this. So a vote now means that we are going to print in the town warrant that we will recommend this 1.5% budget on the floor of town meeting. So just to be clear, we're not talking about options. This is it.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. So I see no hands, or we will go in reverse order. Kind of switch it up here. Kiara, again, this is for or against the 1.5% revenue budget?
No.
No. Susan Klein
Yes.
is yes. Jackie Katz?
Yes.
Yes with Jackie Katz. Thank you. Jonathan Hurwitz?
Yes.
Yes with Jonathan. Michael Huff?
No.
I vote no. Brian Bichkowski?
No.
No. Kristen Balish?
No.
Okay, so the count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's and 3 yeses. Is that accurate? Susan Jacobson.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion to approve the 1.5% revenue budget does not pass. Now we can entertain motions to either, just for the sake of argument, assuming that we already voted against the 0.13, somebody could move to reconsider that, or a brand new option that we haven't talked about. So I open it up to the committee.
So I mean, I agree with largely everything that's been talked about this, and there are lots of different ways to go about it. My thoughts originally, I'm pushing for the 0.13 holds true, which is even if we were to pass the higher amount, it's doing what we're really doing is setting a marker for next year's budget that we want to be able to build off of. And I think that is absolutely right. If this is a short-term issue and the revenue comes back in next year, this committee needs to support the growth back for the schools in a place that we could be. The consideration that the KP schools could not execute a higher number without the other towns going was definitely a factor, as was a factor in my mind with the town and the Norfolk schools also saying that they wouldn't be able to execute to that number. I believe we should play the budget the way it is and then strongly advocate for next year based on the situations that are next year and not limit ourselves to what there was. So based on those, I would put forward a motion to reconsider the 013 budget with an understanding that next year, given the circumstance, if the circumstances allow, this committee should not just build a baseline off of where that puts us, but understand that we can add to it and make a strong recommendation based on where we think the budget should be next year. But for this year, the 013 should be considered.
Understood. So is there a second to Brian's motion?
Second.
And who seconded? Kristen. Okay, thank you, Kristen. Now, as we enter in this general discussion, there's a point that I would like to make, and that is to your comment, Brian, about wanting to make clear that the steps that are being taken for the 0.13 are in no way trying to endorse, or that shouldn't be used as an excuse for us to just ratchet services down. That what you're saying is, we, even though we're taking this step, we very much see the baseline. And I see this as being a lot of the point that Susan Klein was making is that, the board, regardless of what it is that we're voting for, I'm hearing the consensus of all of us that, or a whole lot of us, I should say, that our baseline needs to be, shall we say, at the 1.5? Is that a fair characterization? As a marker of what to try to get back to in the future. Is that a fair characterization? Susan, does that represent where you are at?
Are you asking me or the other Susan?
Sorry, Susan Klein.
Well, the 1.5 is the 2.4 budget, which, if everyone remembers, there was a 7-month-long quest to start at zero and build the budget with things that were only absolutely necessary.
Yes.
So that was the 2.4. At that time, we did not know that we were going to be able to, we had not been approached yet by the state to take on more towns at the MEC. The offer from them created basically around $380,000 influx for us for this year if we were able to get it done in time, and Blythe worked really hard to get that done in time. So the 1.5 simply represents the original 2.4, which was which was created after starting at zero and working their way up, and then minusing out the 380 for the MEC. If you went down to 1.3, you'd also be minusing out retiree health benefits, which again, I have asked multiple times for this to be brought forth for a revote to the select board, because I find it incongruent with their current stance to cut current employees' benefits and pay without cutting retirees. So I am again asking for that. And I have been told they're going to discuss it at their June 2nd meeting. We'll see if that happens. I'm sorry, I just realized I was off
It's
camera.
on the agenda for next week, I saw.
Yeah, so I'm hopeful that that is the discussion, and I'm hopeful that they pass that, because that would at least show me that they're serious about saving money. If you want to save money in this town, then you need to save money where you can save it. You can't speak out of both sides of your mouth. You got to put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to cut things, then cut it where it needs to be cut, and that's a place that needs to be cut. So,
So actually,
the
Susan,
1.5 is the original 2.4, but minus the MEC money.
okay. So if you pause there, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to propose we can pass a resolution, and we could just say the sense of the advisory committee is going forward. We expect any budget proposals, any presentation will include X as our baseline. Now I'm trying just to figure out what you want to name X. I mean, I appreciate the history. That should we call it the 2.4? I'm just saying I would
actually call it the 2.4 because
okay, good.
that is what the money they needed. That the fact that Blythe was able to find 400,000 is it's completely separate from what the schools actually need to have a level. The schools and the town need to have level service. They needed 2.4 this year to get to level service. The level service next year should be 2.4 plus level service,
Okay,
which is going to put us at about a 5 to 6% budget next year, which is going to be hard pressed to pass.
So what I am sort of suggesting is the 2.4. We would expect that's going to be our baseline for an attempt to then get back on that track. And I hear a lot of the concern from several members here that we don't want to use this emergency and the response to the emergency to somehow be used in a separate quest to achieve a certain funding level and being kind of opportunistic about it, if that's a fair characterization. And again, we don't want to, ascribe motives, but nonetheless, if we were to pass the 0.13% budget and have a resolution that says everything that folks are going to bring forward next year, the schools, Blythe, whatever it is, has to include the 2.4% as the baseline that we would like to consider any further proposals from. Again, it's non-binding, but I'm just saying we're making it clear.
But that means about as much as anyone saying they're going to restore the money in the fall. It really, it's all talk. I mean, it's great. And I appreciate it. And I'm sure that Ingrid, Paul, and Blythe and all of the teachers that are on this call appreciate the fact that next year they might get their jobs back, or next year they might actually have appropriate number of students in their classrooms. But sorry for this year. It's great that we're saying that, but it's just what's going to happen next year. I will stay pleasantly optimistic next year, but right now I'm not feeling that way.
Understood. And I appreciate the reasons why. Again, and I know that people are going to, I still think, at least from my perspective, there's we generally react to things. The select board is here, we respond, the select board's there, we respond, stuff happens. It might be nice for when you're just going in, making something very clear that we would like to see in the beginning as an option, just in terms of due time to consider it, making it very clear for everyone's consideration that this needs to be dealt with now or later. And I would prefer that they deal with it, now. When I say now, I mean when they're actually trying to figure out and do the math for the next budget proposal. But anyway, that was just a suggestion, because I would like the sentiment to find some kind of expression, whether it's binding or not. I still think it has value.
Right. My hope would also be that the people who vote on budgets and the people who put forth the budget recommendations, i.e. the select board or anyone else who's doing it, also remembers that property values are tied to school ratings. So anyone who wants to cut money from schools also needs to consider that they're cutting money out of their own pocket, because
Understood. No, I understood.
Rating is directly tied to your property value. And also, this doesn't lower your taxes at all. Your
okay,
taxes.
So I appreciate that. Kristen, yes, please ask your question.
Yeah, I just feel like I need to respond to that a little bit, just because I feel like I don't like the 0.13 budget. I don't like it. As a resident who has a parent who has kids in the school system, I don't like it. For me, I just feel like it is the safer route to go. I think it's more realistic in terms of revenue projection, and that's the only reason that I am going to be supporting it today, right? It's not because I think we should be cutting anything, like I'm the last person that wants to cut services. I have a different view on what I think is going to happen, and that is all. It's not something about my kind of philosophy on this. And I think that if we vote in a higher budget and then the revenues don't come through, we have to make bigger cuts later. And that is something that I heard loud and clear from Dr. Ilardi and basically everyone that is closest to this work. Like we asked point blank last week, would you want us to pursue a higher budget, or do you want us to kind of stick with the 0.13? And I think we all know there are folks here who want budget cuts, and then there are some that don't. And from my perspective, even the folks I wouldn't assume wanted budget cuts were like, you know what, I think we need to do this, right? The people who are affected by those cuts. And I take them at their word that I think, we should put faith in their leadership here. And if, all those folks agree, then I want to support them on that. It wasn't like we had half the people, that were making these decisions saying, we don't want the cuts versus saying we do. I think everyone kind of came in and said, no one likes this, but we think we landed here. And so that is where I am kind of landing, is to support the folks that are Todd and Blythe and the select board and Dr. Ilardi and Mr. Zinni, like they all kind of had the same perspective. And so that is something I think is important.
Does anyone, thank you for sharing that. Does anyone have any questions? And I'm really putting him on the spot, but we of course have with us the wonderful Kevin Calcutt, who takes the time to attend our meetings until the bitter end. We are about to vote on the select board budget. I just didn't know if maybe Kevin had a perspective to share, or if anyone had a specific question for him. I am not seeing that, which is completely fine too. That's okay. So we will call the vote. Seeing no hands are up. I've scrolled to the top of the screen. Yes, no hands are up.
So I don't think there was actually a second. Was there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, there was. Oh, my mind's breaking.
It was Kristen. Yeah, it's late. It's late, although not as bad as last time. We're at 9:45. That's actually pretty good. You have to grade on a curve. All righty, calling the vote. We will go alphabetically. So again, a vote yes is to approve and endorse the 0.13% budget recommended by the select board. A vote no is to say, no, we don't want to do that. We'd like to consider something different. Okay. Kristen Balish.
Yes.
Yes. Brian Bichkowski.
Yes.
I vote yes. Michael Huff.
Yes.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
No.
Jackie Katz.
No.
Susan Klein. Susan Klein.
Sorry, I was muted. Definitely no.
Definitely no. Kiara Moore.
Yes.
Okay, so I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses and 3 nos.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Susan Jacobson. So the motion passes to then approve Article 3, which is
I
the
do
select board
think-
budget.
Jackie raised a good point in the chat box about how we plan on presenting it at town meeting. Could we possibly discuss that?
Sure, no, I'm fine with that. I mean, we of course procedurally make, the moderator calls on the individual who will be presenting this amongst our ranks, and then we read it. Then I believe we do get the first word about comments. So yeah, we can very much express the sense of the select board. By the way, our write-up can also be substantial.
Yeah,
So,
I think
yes.
whoever writes it should definitely, I don't want to volunteer anyone, but I would assume that if Jackie or Kiara or someone similar feels strongly that those words should be added in, then they should be the one writing it. I am letting you know now, I refuse to write this warrant support.
Understood.
I will choose whatever else you assign me, but I will not write.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
I don't think anyone would want that, even if, even in theory. So it's best that I stay away from this one.
So
Dave Lutz.
Yeah, I think
he's not here.
David Lutz would feel the exact same way that I do. So I would assume that if you want certain language and you want this, to be spun in a positive way, that, It should not be myself or David or even.
Understood. Although I believe it is, well, I like the custom of saying that the vote was not unanimous and just delivering a bit of what the minority report is, as it were. And we can talk about who wants to write it at some other point. We are coming up on the 10 o'clock hour. I know we had on the agenda looking to try to consider other articles. Susan Jacobson, if I could tag you back in. We do have a meeting booked for next week, at which point I think that's our last opportunity before we need to vote on everything and then get the start on the recommendations. Is that correct?
Yeah, so next week we could have, depending upon how the select board votes, we could have a petitioner, if they're able to attending, if there is yet another article. I don't know that yet. So at best, we would have the articles to vote and possibly a citizen to speak to a petition. Well, it's not a petition article if the select board, I guess it's to speak would.
Yeah, it's a request for them.
Yeah, it's kind of a.
Yeah, it's a little bit different.
So other than that, and we'll have some minutes to approve next week. We would have the articles to go through and assign, and everybody needs to have their recommendations to me ASAP.
Understood. And we can talk a little bit more about the timing of that. Jen Wynn, one of our guests, actually has her hand up. Is there a question that you have, Jen? If you could unmute yourself, Ms. Wynn.
Yes, sorry, I was on
That's
a
okay.
platform. No, I have a comment.
Comment.
Comment. So don't worry, Arthur. I will be quick.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You've
come
waited
on.
this line.
As a
You've earned it.
resident for many years, many of you know me. I've been on boards. I've been in social clubs. I've been leaders, whatever. I've been invested in the town because I just find it very unique and I love it. And I just want to say that I get to talk to many residents, and while many don't have time to always be involved, such as yourselves, they are very, very curious. And they always appreciate when I tell them what the advisory board does and the different experiences and expertise that each varied board members brings. It is truly the epitome of democracy, the advisory board. And I know from the many people that I speak with, they're very curious about advisory board and very appreciative of the values and points of views that each one of you brings. And it is truly representative of all this unique, dynamic, diverse population that we have here in Norfolk. And I just want to say it is truly just really what democracy is built on. And I really appreciate the opportunity to explain to people how valuable advisory board is. So thank you for your time.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. We appreciate the thumbs up. I think we just got a thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jen.
My guess is that's Jen's way of saying she would not support the citizens, or not citizens petition, but the select board request that's going to be coming forth next week.
No, and I will definitely be informing people at all my social and yada, yada events.
A whole lot more to come. Understood. Thank you. Blythe, you had your hand up. Yes, please.
Excuse me, Arthur, 1 second. I'm not trying to stir anything. I just want to ask you a question.
No,
Is
sure.
there any warrants that are, as we like to put it on the advisory board, easy peasy, fall off the thing that we can pass this evening? Because I have a feeling next week's meeting is going to be, should it pass the select board, I have a feeling it's going to be a very contentious meeting next week. So it may end up taking up a lot of time. So if there are any, I haven't read through it, but if you and Susan know of some of the easier ones that we don't necessarily need lots of discussion or David Lutz on, could we go ahead and at least pass those this evening just to get some clerical work done?
Would folks, well, okay, I appreciate that. Let me go to Blythe real quickly. She's had her hand up before I address that. Yes, Blythe.
I'm the last one who wants to, to have everyone stay for later meetings, but I would kind of like to echo what Susan said, because we really need to get this to the printer at the end of next week. So if we can take care of the, as he calls them, the easy peasies, that would be great.
Okay, well.
But I understand whichever way you do it.
Would anyone like to speak against the sentiment here to at least continue for, say, another 15, 20 minutes and see how much that we can get through? You're such a hardcore bunch. Thank you. Outstanding. Okay. Article 1, And by the way, feel free to chime in, Blythe, with what you think is easy and peasy. The town, Article 1 is a procedural article about indoor, this is the election?
Yep.
Can you characterize this for us, Blythe?
It'll be taken care of on June 23rd, so you don't need to take a position.
So no action necessary. Okay, very good. Article 2 is paying prior bills, of which I believe there are none, correct?
So that would be, we'd recommend an IP.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion on Article 2? Don't be shy now, come on.
Motion to IP Article 2.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So that's Susan moved, and I believe Brian seconded, or Jonathan, or both of you. Your call, Susan Jacobson. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the article? Seeing no hands up, we will just do this by a voice vote. If I get into some significant nays, happy to do a roll call. All in favor of indefinitely postponing Article 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And is there anyone opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 3, Blythe, any comments here?
Yes, we will have some transfers. You might want to wait on this one till next week, but generally I'll tell you that we have lead transfers in the areas of town council expenses, unemployment expenses. We need funds to affect the work for the 5-year evaluation. And there might be an account I'm missing, and I see Todd is unmuted, so he can fill in what I forgot.
Yes, Todd.
I'm all for now.
Awesome.
Okay.
We'll get you those numbers so you can vote with a little more information in front of you.
Appreciate that. Very well. Article 4, this is the compensation schedule COLA adjustments for non-union employees, Blythe.
Let's wait on that one too. We are in the middle of negotiations with groups, and I'm not sure which way I would want you to go on that.
Appreciate that. Article 5, we already moved on. Article 6, transfers for the Public Works Enterprise Fund and the Water Division.
Budget effect for the Water Enterprise Fund.
Are there changes to that, or is this something that we can speak to and vote on tonight?
I would say it's something you could speak to and vote on tonight. I would just point out that it's a slightly different layout in this article than prior years because it puts all the numbers in, which usually people wouldn't get to town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's now only one article for water and sewer rather than a operating and a capital. We've combined them into one. And in this case, there is a capital expense to add some retained earnings to make sure we have sufficient funds to finish the Holbrook Street well.
Very good. And just a point of clarification, this is coming from dedicated Water Division enterprise funds and will be spent for that purpose. So this doesn't have larger impacts. Okay, I will, looking for a motion on Article 6.
Motion to approve Article 6.
Was that you, Susan? Okay, thank you, Susan Klein. And do I have a second?
Second.
Michael Huff seconded. Very good. Any discussion on Article 6? Questions? Anyone want to raise your hand? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote again. All in favor of passing Article 6, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? It is unanimously passed. Article 7, we're talking here about the wastewater sewer division, again, an enterprise fund budget. Any comments, Blythe?
A little more straightforward, much smaller budget, no capital, all funded from department receipts.
Excellent. I will take a motion.
Okay, again, I motion to approve Article 7. Somebody
Wait.
unmute and speak up so it's not just me.
Way to keep us going, Susan. You have lots of momentum. I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Second by Kristen. We have a motion and a second to approve Article 7 in the warrant. Any discussion? Any hands raised? Seeing none, all in favor by voice vote, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? It passes unanimously. Article 8.
We would recommend indefinite postponement. We're not planning to fund any capital at this time.
Okay. Given that IP recommendation, do we have a motion to IP this?
I motion to IP.
That's okay. So we'll say Mike Huff
Shamed everyone.
Jackie Katz seconded, so it's a Mike and Jackie show. Everyone's stepping up to the plate after Susan's comments, so thank you. Any discussion on Article 8? Looking for raised hands. Okay, seeing none. All in favor by voice vote, please say aye. Aye. And any opposition to IPing? No nays. Article 8 passes unanimously. Article 9, comments live.
Same thing, no capital planned by borrowing, so recommend an IP.
Looking for a motion.
Jackie, you're up.
Okay, motion to IP Article 9.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Susan. Okay, motion by Jackie Katz. Any discussion regarding the motion to IP Article 9? Seeing no hands up, all in favor by voice vote to IP this article, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Article 10, Special Education Reserve Fund. Yes, Blythe.
Pass that one.
We voted on that, right?
Voted on that.
We did. Susan Jacobson, do you have the vote for that recorded? I also recall us voting for that.
Favorable action.
Yeah, it passed.
All in favor? Does everybody remember?
I believe all in favor is a yes, but I believe there was someone absent. I don't.
I can go back through the meeting.
Okay.
Don't count that as fact. That's just how my brain remembers it. But you know, that was pre-COVID, I think.
Oh, the good old days that we didn't even know. Okay, so we believe Article 10 was in fact already passed and acted upon. Susan, please confirm. Jacobson, that is, please confirm. And if there's any issues, we can correct it at our next meeting. Article 11.
That's committee reports, and I don't know that there are going to be any. I haven't heard.
So we could just skip this?
Yeah.
Skipped.
Yeah,
Article 12. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think with trying to keep town meeting as brief as possible this year, I'm not sure we're going to get too many people that want to make committee reports.
Agreed. I would be surprised as well. So skipping Article 11, going to Article 12, mailing warrants. Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Are you asking if anyone's going to be presenting a committee report? Because I do know that Josh from MAPC is going to be presenting the MAPC report from one. Jay just asked him to keep it to 15 minutes or less. That was what we discussed in last week's B1 meeting. So unless that's changed since last Monday, he will be presenting, but it will be kept. Jay has already told him to keep it brief.
And
we'll have-
Arthur, if I could interject for a brief moment.
Yes, Kevin, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I think that where we are right now with that is Josh is not going to be able to attend town meeting in person, and I am not sure that we're going to have the capabilities to have him participate remotely. So I think our next best option is to have an external meeting of town meeting to present that final report to the rest of the town in a virtual setting.
Okay, thank you.
That's good to know.
Yep.
Thanks for the update, Kevin. Appreciate that.
Thank
and
you.
actually, I'm going to pause us going through the warrant here for a procedure, or sorry, okay. I got a request that I wanted to, just because you mentioned the B1s, the B1 working committee, and I was I received an email from Richard McCarthy, basically saying that our designee to the B1 zoning working committee is about to expire June 30th. At your next meeting, if you could discuss and vote a reappointment to the B1 zoning district working committee, that would be graciously appreciated. I believe this is you, Susan.
It is.
Okay.
I will stay on if that's what you wish, but I'm also happy to relinquish the role to anyone here who would prefer to do it. I
would love the dark mysteries of zoning.
I'll do it if you want me to, but if anyone else wants to step up, feel free.
You like it? What's it like?
I mean, I've done a lot of work. I will say it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of learning and a lot of understanding. And I can tell you that I've looked up more building heights and building codes than I've ever wanted to in my whole life. So don't do it if you're bored easily with zoning. But if I don't want to hog the wealth. So
I think you're doing a good job. I'll just say that. I'm in full support of you staying with it.
Okay.
So generous, so generous.
I would never quit and leave the advisory board without my dual role, because I do think the advisory board needs someone there, but I also don't want to just stay if someone else would like to take that role.
Thank you for
I
that.
wanna
I
make sure you
appreciate
actually
that.
like doing it, because I would love for you to keep doing it. That's my perspective. But only if you want to.
Say that after last week's meeting, like is probably not the right word. I am probably right now, as far as people on the advisory board, not because I have any expertise, just because I've been doing it for a while now, probably the most knowledgeable of what's going on. But that's not to say that I'm necessarily the best person. And I could probably say that after last week's meeting, there's some people who would rather me not be there. I may have ruffled a few feathers last week, but you know, it is what it is. So if Arthur, if you've gotten feedback that they want me to be replaced, then that's, you know, more power to them. If you want me to stay, I'll stay. And
I read you the entirety of the message. There's no secret section from eyes only beneath.
Yeah.
I will take a quick
Someone else
pause.
wants that opportunity, I'm happy to relinquish, but if you don't, I'm happy.
Thank
to
you. I will pause you for a quick second. Jen Wynn, our guest, has a
Hi,
question.
thank you, Arthur.
Sure.
No, I just want to say, I think the benefit, I follow B1 somewhat, of having somebody like Susan, representative of advisory board on it, is that I believe that she's not on any sort of board. She doesn't own any property other than her home in town. And there's definitely, you know, with the B1, there's definitely pushes, from my understanding, from people who own land to get things changed, and maybe not in the best interest of what people move here for, which is, you know, a small town feel. And while we understand that growth needs to be made, we also want to try our best to maintain that, because that's what keeps Norfolk unusual and property values up. So I do think having Susan on, and I'm not sure if it's public knowledge, did you get some sort of email that was derogatory?
No, I think that just the position was up. It was a point.
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right, good.
correct.
Because I mean, we're all working here. No one's going to like every single opinion. And we're volunteers, and some of us are even employees, and we should not be cyberbullied by people sending nasty emails because
I
they
agree.
disagree.
I agree.
And so I just want to say thank you. And I do like the fact that she doesn't have a horse in the race, and a gentle reminder to people, you know, just please, there's no need for derogatory remarks, because someday somebody might just post it out there. And as I tell my children, if you wouldn't say it to your mother, don't say it in an email. That's it. Thank you.
Jen,
Or other darker forms of social media. Yes, the mobs form quickly.
and if you don't be careful, people are going to start thinking I paid you to say these nice things about me.
No, I don't. I barely know Susan. I just follow politics, and I understand some of the emails that people get. And I'm just saying, please think about it, because someday it might go public, and you don't want that for you. Believe me, I know.
We do.
We teach it all the time to kids in social media. Please, please. We're all volunteers. We're doing our best. We all have different views. Everybody's view should be appreciated.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that excellent message. I would take so if there is somebody else who really has an interest in this, I believe that Susan is happy to share. However, if not, happy to entertain a motion to, and again, sorry, the motion here would be to reappoint Susan Klein as the advisory committee's representative to the B1 zoning working committee.
Second.
Well, I actually can't make a motion. I'm just trying to say what the motion is. Sorry. So I mean, perhaps we can say that Jackie just made that motion. Thank you, Jackie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jonathan. Okay. Any discussion on the appointment?
Pass.
Any discussion on the reappointment of Susan Klein to the B1 Working Zoning Committee? Seeing no hands up, we'll try this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? It is unanimously passed. I will let Mr. McCarthy know. Thank you. We are now on. Yep. Sorry, Susan.
I said, yay, that's the first thing I've ever won.
First thing, really? You sure?
Pretty much.
Okay. Okay. Well, which brings us to Article 12, which is mailing warrants. Blythe, do you have perspective on this? You might be muted, Blythe. Did we lose Blythe?
Understanding is that from Town Government Study Committee is this bylaw change would require the town to mail both the annual and the special town meeting warrants rather than the postcard.
Okay, any questions or
Well, I think
discussion about
that's
this?
submitted by the town. Is this because you don't want to do the postcards? You want to mail the warrant even in the fall?
I don't have a position on it. I think the town government study committee, heard people say they were frustrated by the postcard. They wanted it mailed. So this would require that both be mailed rather than just.
I mean, personally, I think that's subjective because the reason we switched to the postcard in the first place is because we got feedback that they didn't want the warrant, they didn't read the warrant, and they would rather us not spend the money on the fall warrant. So, I mean, we didn't just change it because we felt like it. We changed
Oh, I
it
understand.
on the same thing. So, and I think that's the whole case. You're never going to please everybody. So, I mean, personally, if we're talking about cutting money, this seems like a silly way to spend money. I mean, I'd certainly rather make sure we're paying, our town employees appropriately before we're mailing out paper that's going to end up in somebody's recycle bin. When you can
Yeah, and that's if it ends up in the recycle bin. I mean,
you can access information online. You can walk into town hall and get it, and you can call the town clerk and request it be printed and mailed to you. It's not like you can't get it should you want it. It just seems like a waste of money to me. And if we're sitting here complaining about $2,000 here, $7,000 there, and $9,000 here, and you really want to spend money to mail out the Foul Town warrant to, 6,000 households, I mean, it seems a little silly.
Understood. Kristen, yes, you had your hand up.
I feel like we discussed this like many meetings ago and we were still in person and everyone was in favor of it. So I'm curious if people have different perspective now. And I think at that time we had talked about, and I used to be on that committee as well, and it came up when I was on there, it was trying to figure out how to increase turnout. And obviously part of increasing turnout at town meeting is, basically marketing, right? And so the postcards were doing something, but I think we had heard from residents that, especially some of the older residents, that sending me a postcard with a link to go on the internet is not going to get certain subsets of people the warrant. It's more geared towards younger folks. I'll just leave it at that. So, I think we kind of heard that and thought, okay, maybe we do need to go back to mailing them. Another thing I remember hearing, but maybe Susan Jacobson can clarify if I heard this correctly, was that the amount of the postage for postcards have gone up enough where it's not that different to maybe send a booklet. I don't know if I'm misrepresenting that, but there was something around the cost where it started to become negligible. And so if we're going to bother mailing something, we might as well mail something that's going to actually be worth it.
Right. So
Susan, yes,
I'm not sure that we could say that it's the same as a postcard because it clearly depends on the weight of the warrant. But I've been working for the advisory committee for 10 years, and they did always mail the warrant for both meetings. And then the committee voted probably 5 or 6 years ago to try to save some money, to send a postcard in the fall and to mail it in the spring. It's more than just the cost is more than just the postage. We have to have a warrant printed. When we don't mail in the fall, I print all of the warrants in-house and provide copies for town meeting. So it's and depending upon how big the warrant is, which is always the unknown, it determines how much it's going to cost at the printer. So if the committee is going to vote to make this change based on the town government study committee, then the town has to be prepared to add some money into the advisory committee's budget for printing and mailing, because it basically is going to be whatever the town warrant costs to print and mail in the spring. It may be a little bit less because fall town meetings tend to be a little bit lighter in as far as content goes, but they definitely are going to need to add some money into the advisory committee's printing and mailing budget.
I also believe that I know we discussed this when we were discussing the postcards, and I was on the board when that happened, so it must have been around 3 years ago, not 5, but because I actually remember voting on this. It might have been one of the very first things that we did when I was on the board. So maybe it was 4 years, but whatever it was. I also believe that, I don't remember, somebody may need to remind me who was also there, Jonathan or Arthur.
I was there.
It was either Stephen McDonough or Jay had basically counted out the numbers, and the fall warrant, the special town meeting in the fall was similarly attended regardless of whether or not we had sent the postcard or the warrant. They compared the numbers. Arthur, do you remember what I'm talking about? I don't know if it was Stephen or Jay, but they did it.
I don't.
There was no change in the numbers, no significant change in the numbers. They find the only significant change in the numbers of town meeting that are attended is what's on the warrant.
Yeah,
Meaning,
the specific
when
articles.
the
Sure.
B1 stuff was there, it was going to be
Sure.
very well attended because people either oppose it or support it. Same thing with school committee. This one was probably going to be, well, COVID may change it, but hypothetically, if we weren't talking about COVID, it would be a very well attended meeting because of the budget cuts,
Understood. Understood.
So I don't think it has anything to, I think they did compare the numbers and they found that there was no significant difference based on what kind of warrant was mailed to them.
Okay, thank you. Mike, yes, you have your hand up.
I feel confused on why the town government study committee would recommend it if it wasn't something that was valuable.
Anyone can add perspective to that, Blythe, or just like where the perspective of them?
Mike, I can't speak for the B1, the town government study committee, but I think that from back when this was changed to just a postcard, I think that some people still enjoy getting a hard, it's like people that still buy the newspaper, right? Or still get the newspaper sent to them versus people that read their newspaper online. We can't assume that everybody in town has access to a computer. They can call town hall. There are other ways to get it, but I think that it's a very it's a tradition, and I think getting away from the tradition had some people hoping that we would go back to mailing it both town meetings. It was done in an effort to save some costs. But I just think that you have some people that when it comes, if it hangs around on the kitchen counter and they look through it, but I think it was clear that it doesn't, mailing the town warrant or mailing a postcard doesn't increase your numbers by a lot of people.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
Does
Thank
it
you.
cost? So I'm so sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Do you know the incremental, like ballpark?
So I can just give you a ballpark that it's around $1,000 to mail, but that depends again on the weight of it. And it's around $1,500 to print. Again, if we have 50 pages, it's significantly higher. If we have 10 pages, it's significantly lower. But it's the warrant, and then there's a cover page, and then there's a letter from the chair of the advisory committee, and then there's an index, and then on the back page, it's signed by the 3 select board members, and then there's a back cover page. So, I've seen it as high as $4,000 on years that we've had a heavy lift, if you will, and I've seen it for printing costs. The least expensive is probably $700, but we made a big change. We went to newspaper print instead of, if you all get the Park and Rec printed pamphlet, that's a much heavier stock of paper. And that was a significant savings, but it's still, if it's $3,000 or between $3,000 and $4,000 in the spring, then it's going to be between $2,000 and $4,000 in the fall.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Thank you. Kristen, yes, you have your hand up.
I just remembered one more reason that the town government study committee had mentioned. And again, I'm not saying I support or not support this, but one thing that came up was that, my understanding of the history is that generally the spring town meeting had more on the agenda than the fall. And that's, in some years there weren't even fall town meetings, but so at some level it made sense to have a full printed warrant for the spring, but not the fall. But over time, fall has become, in some cases, just as packed with stuff on the agenda. And so it would be weird to have one for one and not the other. So that was, again, I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but that was one of the things I had heard kind of espoused during that discussion.
Okay, thank you. I will just chime in here with a couple thoughts. As others have mentioned, this is not the first time the advisory committee has taken this up. I've seen arguments. Yeah, this is this is an old chestnut, and I've seen various sides of it. I guess where I'm at now is there will always be arguments to them do this. There will always be arguments against this. At the end of the day, I really try to say, okay, like what do I feel like is more of the right thing to them do? From my perspective, I appreciate that there are people who enjoy the feel of print more. I do people who enjoy the ritual. However, that just feels more speculative to me. I mean, yes, there's lots of things that I enjoy that I can't or don't do anymore. You know, it's like, we're going to have to take a stand. It's, you know, I'm going to vote for electronic. You know, all the banks push it, all the, I mean, there are reasons why people communicate more and more electronically. I think that those are good reasons. If people really want a printed copy, they can print it out themselves, or they can go to the library, they could go to town hall itself. So, I mean, there are ways to get copies. I just personally feel like there's more benefit to taking a stand on making it electronic and making it stick, as opposed to kind of vacillating back and forth. So that's just my 2 cents. Michael, yes.
So my opinion then, based on this information, is that it sounds like a nice to have, but I mean, we don't have enough money for anything else. So why do this now?
Okay, thank you. Kiara, yeah, hand up, hand down. Okay.
Good, thank you.
Okay, there being, I don't think we have a motion on this. Okay, so I'm open to a motion going either way.
Well, if no one else is going to say it, I make a motion to not pass.
To take a vote on?
So I guess I make a motion to approve or to vote. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to say approve. I want to say vote.
Well, but we have to vote for a motion. So you vote to reject the article.
Okay, there you go. I vote to reject.
Second.
Do we have a second? And Kristen seconds. Do we have that, Susan Jacobson? Okay, excellent. Okay, discussion. Any other points people would like to make about the motion to reject Article 12? So a vote yay means you do not want print, and you want us to do electronic.
I'd love this to be right after the budget discussion, so we can have a very nitpicky discussion about that and then immediately move to paying $3,000 to mail out the warrant.
Exactly my point. I'm making the point that it's not that I don't think the citizens need the warrant. Sure, in a perfect world we could, but if we're cutting teacher salaries and police department officials, I do not want to pay to send out a warrant.
Just go to my money tree.
So let me just put up my money tree and give you an additional $3,000. No thanks.
Okay, other points of view. Thank you. Other points of view.
I'll just repeat, there's an environmental cost to this also.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Motion.
Making more. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded.
Kristen first.
It's been moved and seconded. So again, a vote yay means to reject the article. A vote nay means that you would like to have printing happen. We will go alphabetically. I will do the roll call. Kristen Balish.
Yay.
Brian Beachkowski.
Yay.
I vote yay to reject. Michael Huff.
Yay to reject.
I'm sorry?
Yay.
Yay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Jonathan Hurwitz.
Yes.
Jackie Katz.
Yes.
Susan Klein.
Yes.
And Kiara.
No.
That's totally fine. At least there was a reason why I did the roll call vote instead of voice vote. So there was a dissent. Okay.
Look at Kiara's wonderful bookshelf behind her.
Yeah, that's substantial. That's substantial. Okay, so it passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 1. Okay, so the article is rejected. I'm looking at the time. We're at 10:20. I think we have some CPC stuff to go through here. We're skipping 13 for now, correct? No, wait. 13 is the revolving funds?
There are some changes in revolving funds. They're minor, but if you want to do quick ones, I would move on to CPC.
Okay, so we'll skip 13. Let's at least get through the CPCs tonight because those are pretty quick, I think. Article 14, requesting authorization for
This is
admin.
the
and
annual article to spend $15,000 for administrative costs.
I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, so Brian seconded, Susan Klein made the motion to approve Article 14. Any discussion, any hands up? Seeing no questions, we'll try voice vote. All in favor of passing Article 14, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. Article 15, Blythe.
This is the annual article to put 10% of the funds in each of the 3 buckets for FY21.
And is this any different from last year, Blythe?
Nope.
Nope. Same article.
Change the year.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. You were changing the year just to see if we were paying attention. Okay, Article 15. I will accept a motion.
Motion to approve Article 15.
Second?
Second.
Okay, approved. Motion made by Susan, seconded by Jonathan. Any discussion on Article 15? Seeing no hands raised, we'll try voice vote. All in favor of passing Article 15, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Article 15 passes unanimously. Article 16, Blythe.
If you want to do quick things, I would wait till next week on this one and jump to 17. Which
Okay,
is
17. Please walk us through 17.
Chapter 9. This is simply the authorization to allow the select board to spend Chapter 90 funds when they come in to do road work.
Any questions people have about Article 17? And this is a standard article, right? This is every year.
Very standard.
Motion to
Okay.
approve Article 17.
Susan moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
And Kristen seconded.
I've been sitting in this chair way too long, so we gotta move this along.
Haven't we all? Okay, any discussion on Article 17? Looking for hands? Seeing none. Everyone who would like to approve Article 17, please say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously. 18, I believe, is also standard, Blythe, correct?
Correct.
This is just to accept grants and such.
Correct.
Any questions? Seeing no hands up, I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve Article-
Was that you,
Yes.
Kristen?
No, Susan. Motion to approve Article 18.
And a second?
Second.
And Kiara seconded. Susan made the motion. Any discussion on Article 18? Okay, all in favor of approving Article 18, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, say nay. Article passes unanimously. Article 19, this is surplus property.
Correct.
Does this apply?
I'm sorry?
I mean, do we vote on this or?
Yes, you do. And it just allows us to go ahead and sell whatever we have. We've got a great auction going of old vehicles on publicsurplus.com. Dying for a fire truck or a 2003 police car? The getting's good. Look at bids.
Nice. We appreciate the sales pitch. Well, it's too bad we can't like roll the URL across the screen. We'll have to work on that. Okay. Any discussion on Article 19? Questions for Blythe? No. Seeing no hands up, I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve Article 19.
A second?
Second.
That is Susan and Kiara making the motion and seconding respectively. Any discussion on Article 19? Seeing no hands, all in favor of passing the article, please say by voice vote aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Article 19 passes unanimously. Article 20 is being withdrawn, Blythe?
No?
I see a bunch of stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, the cross off is what they're looking to amend, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, this is zoning, right?
Correct.
I
Maybe-
can probably speak to that one pretty quickly.
Okay, Susan Jacobson, go for it.
I'm putting on my affordable housing hat now. So we had language in the bylaw that would have allowed a 2-family to be potentially built in a development, say of 14 homes, where the developer, or let's say 19, where the developer would have to provide 2 affordable units because of the number of units he's put in his subdivision. And a developer actually came before the planning board with a plan to build what looked like a single family home from the outside with a single family driveway. But when you opened up the door, it was a 2-family. And the planning board was considering it, not really realizing that it would not be something that DHCD would approve because it would be very identifiable that 2 families lived there, maybe not from the outside, but from the 2 families that lived there. And when they got kind of into some deeper conversation with 1 driveway and 2 families and who parks where. And So we wanted to remove this language because it's not something that would have been allowed to count towards our SHI if it had gone and been approved by the planning board and been put into development. So it's really a housekeeping matter to just take that language out of the bylaw.
Okay, so you're saying that it was where you could have one driveway. You want to remove that language because you don't think it should be allowed to have one driveway for two families.
No, it's that you can't build a single, what looks like a single home from the outside, but houses two families inside in a development of 19 homes. You know, the whole goal with affordable housing is that it's not recognizable to people that live in the neighborhood. And clearly the other 17 homes that lived in that neighborhood would know that that's a two-family home that houses two affordable families.
Gotcha.
So, and it's not something that DHCD would have allowed to count on our subsidized housing inventory. So it's really just best to remove the language so it can't happen accidentally, if you will.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And obviously the planning board supports this because they're submitting the
Yes.
article. Any comments, Blythe, that you wanted to share on this or context? Nope. Okay. Any discussion, questions that people have regarding Article 20? No. Okay, I will take a motion.
Motion to approve? Article, what is it?
20.
20.
Come
Motion-
on, Kristen, be more prepared.
Motion made by Kristen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Like sweating my face off, guys. It's
Let's say Brian got that second. Okay, I think he was a little bit ahead of Susan there. Okay, any discussion on the motion to approve Article 20? Seeing no hands up, let's try a voice vote. All in favor of approving Article 20, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Article 20 passes unanimously. Article 21, another zoning article.
So what I understand about this is it's a provision of our bylaws that's actually has been determined to be discriminatory. And the town was alerted to that in 2013 that we should be removing it for reasons I can't explain. We hadn't, so I would call this zoning housekeeping to remove this from the section I.4.8.11.
It's because you, fair housing, we discussed this with the B1 when they were brought forth, what they were bringing forth. For fair housing, you can't delineate the number of bedrooms. You can only delineate the number of units. So this language says 2 bedrooms and you can't say that. So it's deemed unfair for housing. So they're just changing, in case anybody is wondering what this is about. It looks like they're just changing it from to create the same issue with density. They're saying it's 16 units, not however many per bedroom.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you, Susan.
Any other questions people want to ask regarding Article 21?
I'd just like to point out Susan's involvement with the zoning board is exceptional and made that possible.
Thank you. I would like to say that whether we pass this or not, unfortunately, the state dictates it. So even if we said no to this, we would, if this were ever tried to be enforced, it would be illegal and open us up to lawsuits. So you might as well pass it. That's my point.
We would lose. We would lose.
You would lose. So you might as well pass it. So it's one of those, like, you can say, you can, we can
also
have
the right thing to do. It's also the right thing to do.
We can have a discussion about it if you want, or I can just tell you, you have to vote yes.
Okay, so it seems like both the Susans strongly endorse this. I will take a motion for Article 21.
A motion to approve Article 21.
Okay, I have a second.
Second.
Motion made by Susan, seconded by Jonathan. Any discussion about the motion to approve Article 21? Seeing no hands up, we'll try this by voice vote. All in favor of approving Article 21, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. It passes unanimously, bringing us to Article 22. This is for a public way. We don't have.
So
any
this is
public
a
ways to
street in a subdivision built by a developer that's been, the development's been completed. The street meets standard. It's been through the process with the select board and the planning board. It's all approved and all the appropriate meetings have been held, and so I'm to accept the road.
Thank you. So Nichols Way would like to be part of our public ways. Any
I'd
questions?
just like to note that we have once again outlived the battery of Kevin Calcutt's iPods.
Poor Kevin.
EarPods, sorry about that.
AirPods, yeah.
Wait till next.
That's tough. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to on Article 22.
Motion to approve Article 22.
Kristen made a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second by who?
Jackie?
Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. Motion and seconded. Any discussion about the motion to approve Article 22? Seeing no hands up. All in favor of approving Article 22, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. It passes unanimously, which brings us to the citizen petition.
We already voted on it.
We sure did. And 24 is, wait a minute.
If you want to the votes, we already
Oh,
voted.
24 we voted on.
Right.
Right, they're both
on
voted.
both. We voted on both, correct. So we accepted Article 24, and I believe we rejected 23. We rejected that, right? I don't think we IP'd it. Article
Correct.
23?
I IP'd it.
IP.
We did IP it, okay.
Yep.
Very good.
A point of clarification.
Yes.
So the article regarding the postcards, do you want the write-up to say, the sentence to say rejected as you voted it? I just want to make it clear.
I will find the correct word. Susan, can you ask? I'm not sure if the correct term is rejected or there's a word I'm not thinking of. Susan Jacobs.
Only one annual under my belt. I thought that usually rejected by Norfolk we used your words indefinite postponement, but I'm happy to put whatever you think is appropriate.
I believe we say this article is not supported by the advisory board. The advisory board does not support this article.
I'm trying to remember what we've put when this has happened in the
Words
past.
that we use.
I can pull
Just
some
check.
warrants next week.
Thank you. If you could just check.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are at the end.
I would like to
of-
point out that Article 23 is
Mhm.
likely going to be a moot point at town meeting based on the request that's being made to the select board, because that request effectively disbands the advisory board in its entirety. So
If I can, I wanted to jump in. I realize it's late. Are we in a position to make a motion to vote in respect to my time personally? We've already litigated this once. Can we take a vote on what has the potential to be provided to us? I realize it might not be if the select board doesn't approve it, but I don't necessarily need to debate this again. I would just be as happy for us to take a vote on that right here and right now and
I
move
would
on.
love to do that, but I don't think procedurally we can, because technically it's not a citizen's petition and it has not been approved by the select board to move forward. However, I do think that if and when it moves forward and we meet with next week on the 3rd, as long as everybody else is in agreement, I think we should have very little to no discussion on it.
I don't know if that's, I mean, we have the language. I think we should be able to say that if this is presented to us in the language that we have in front of us today, how do we vote? I don't think we necessarily have to presume the language likely isn't going to change if it comes our way.
Blythe, yes, go ahead.
Unmute.
I generally agree with Jonathan, though I do feel obligated to spend a little bit of time with town council to make sure that he wouldn't, if it's going to be something the selectman would want to have on the warrant, that he wouldn't think there were some changes he should make. And he just got it this afternoon as well. So I can't imagine there would be major and change it overall, but I just have to get ready, I guess, in case they do want to add to the warrant.
I mean, any changes that are going to come from town council are going to be not substantive in nature to the content. It's going to be language, right? And again, out of respect for our time of relitigating this whole conversation, this will be meeting number 3 where we've essentially have discussed the same topic, and out of respect for your time of getting the information onto the printer quickly, I would just as soon we take a vote on it right now.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Susan Jacobson, you had your hand up.
So I just had a question for Blythe. I know I mentioned earlier that this was a little bit of different charted territory because it's not actually going to come in as a citizen's petition. Is that right, Blythe? It's going to, if it's approved, it's going to come in as an article from the select board.
From the select board.
The person who emailed it in said it was specifically not a citizen's petition. He was looking for the select board to sponsor it, is I think how I would characterize it.
Okay, then I may have, maybe it isn't that individual that we should have in. Maybe if the select board chooses to move forward with it, we speak to Kevin about it next week, if that's the case. I'm just throwing it out there. I just don't want to.
I would like to point out as well that if this were to pass through the select board, then the various people on this board who say that they have confidence in our current select board would probably need to rethink that, because we'd all be out of a position.
I understood. I mean, I don't, yeah.
Moot.
Well, but I guess I don't, when the select board presents us with something, I think as a courtesy, we should respond. I mean, Jonathan, how much time do you think we're going to quote unquote waste on this? I mean,
I mean, to be frank, we've already wasted 5 more minutes on it than we should have. I would just like to take a vote, get everyone's read it, I'm presuming, take a vote.
I actually have not
move
read it. I actually have not read it. So, well, let's not waste time on it by not addressing it at all. Let's just have a motion to conclude this night's meeting. This may never happen.
Well, then,
fair enough.
If that's the case, then I will second Jonathan's motion to IP it should it come to us, if that's what he wishes to do tonight. It won't change my feelings on it, whether it's tonight or next week. It will change my feelings on the select board. I can tell you that. If the select board passes this, it'll show us that they have no confidence in our abilities, and we've all been wasting the last 2, 3, 5 years of our lives. So
okay, so I need to get clarification. So this came up once before, and I sort of didn't really address it. I don't understand procedurally. Procedurally, I have to call for a motion, I think. You guys so what I want to avoid doing is having a member preemptively, and I appreciate where you're coming from, Jonathan, but there are people who may want to be heard on this, and I'm just concerned about a combination of events where we pass something quickly, preventing discussion from happening. So I feel a really strong obligation to make sure that appropriate discussion happens. Now, I totally agree that I think this has been discussed to the death. So I think any discussion that we would have on this is
short and sweet,
extraordinarily so. But I'm not a fan of the pattern of we don't want to listen anymore. So boom. Again, that's where I'm at. I believe procedurally, I actually have to ask for a motion on an article. There is no article. I do not believe that we can procedurally vote on it. I'm happy to ask Susan Jacobson to perhaps talk to town council or the appropriate.
Well, all due respect, we voted 1,000 times tonight on things that weren't about articles. It was more of taking a straw poll of do we want more discussion on it or not. So
well, if you'd like to do that, I'm totally in favor. So if we would like to take a straw poll on do we want to reconsider this or not, that's fine. I'm still going to want us to then, however, separate from the directional opinion, make a discussion and vote on any warrant that's presented to us, any warrant article that's presented to us.
Sure. One more quick question, maybe for Kevin. Does it need in order for that to become a warrant article, does it need to pass by 2 or 3 votes? Does it need to be unanimous or just majority?
I believe it's majority, but you can fact check me on that.
Does that weigh into this somehow in terms of whether the likelihood of it happening or not? Or
I believe so.
No, I think that we all know exactly who's going to vote yes on this article.
Okay. Again, in terms of trying to moderate a meeting, I would like to make sure that if we are presented with material to then review, I see that as being our job to then review it. Saying, well, I've already really seen this before. Well, it hasn't even been presented to us. So I appreciate how the substance of it, if we look at it, If the substance of it is a 99.9% rehash, I totally support, let's make a motion and dispose of this and then move on. I just really support the procedure of responding to what the select board presents.
In essence, it's the same concept that I always tell people when I'm discussing B1 or any other zoning. It is literally the same analogy that I've used. When you protest too much and you stop something the first time from coming through, sometimes what comes through the second time is even worse. So we push down their idea of having accounting people on advisory board because our opinion, as well as the opinion of people who own businesses and accounting firms, as well as the moderator, all agreed that, and including our own finance director for the town, all agreed that having someone with a degree in accounting would serve no purpose. It would add no value to this board. So what has happened? We basically said no to the pig farm and we got a 40B. So that's what it is.
Okay, well, again,
He said no. So he said, I hold my beer. I'll show you if you're going to say no. And he brought forth something even worse, which is disbanding the advisory board, putting in place a 5-person finance committee and sending all zoning changes to the planning board and sending everything else to the select board, which renders the advisory board moot. And we all have wasted the last however many years of our lives, changing 100 years of precedent in this town.
Okay, Susan, so to the sense of Jonathan's point, I would not like to discuss this further because I don't think there's anything to been discussed yet. I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying
I was agreeing with you. It's not 99% the same. It's actually worse.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Analogy of pig farm versus 40B. Which did you?
Got it.
So.
Okay, so Mike, yes, you had your hand up, Mike Huff.
No, I'm still very inspired by Mrs. Wynn's compliment of us being a Democratic board, and I think we need to hear all the voices as the process goes.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Brian, yes, sir.
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment about the democracy. I actually think my concern is wholly different this way than it was with the prior discussions we've had about a finance committee, in that the town structure we have right now is that the advisory committee is appointed by a moderator to represent the community. We are the people's check on the board. Having a finance committee appointed by the board that then validates the board finance recommendations is a complete destruction of the built-in checks and balances we have in town government. So I don't think that beyond the idea of a finance committee, the structure here actually eliminates checks and balances that are built into town government in a way that is completely unacceptable.
Agreed.
And not just for that, just so you know, it also said in there that any zoning law changes would be reviewed by the planning board, except approved by the planning board, except they'd be approving the things that they put forth to begin with. So there would be zero checks and balances on them as well.
Yes.
We are here to say, yes, this sounds legal and accurate and in the best interest of the town, and no, it doesn't. If you're approving the only thing you put forward, how is that in the best interest of the town? There's no discerning voice in the room.
Agreed. Again, I would prefer that we not discuss a warrant article that has not even been presented yet. Yes, a lot of things might happen. Let's see what does happen. Thank you for the passion on this subject. Hopefully it will not be necessary. And if we do have to address it, I think it will be brief. Backing up again to Jonathan's point. So I know that folks so Susan Jacobson, are you with me? Susan?
I'm with you.
Okay, so for a point of order, I did not call for a motion. Therefore, there was no motion there was no motion made nor a motion seconded because I did not call for that. Now, that procedurally might be incorrect. I just want to get that clarified. Again, I'm just concerned about, I do not want to have motions that, at least in my judgment, preempt discussion. Because to me, the order is discussion and then we vote. I could be wrong. I would appreciate any clarification that you could find from town council on that. Maybe I have to go read Robert's Rules of Order more carefully. In any event, so I just want to make that procedural issue clear.
So
okay. Yes, Brian, go ahead.
One point on that, because it is a procedural issue.
Yes.
The fact that they specifically made it not a citizen petition and that it is going to a board vote
yes.
May mean that we, as the representative selected folks to speak as the community may not get a chance before this is put forward.
Oh, it very much will. If the board votes for it next week, we're planning on meeting on Wednesday, so we will address it.
Yeah, but yes.
Does that answer your question? Yes, we will have a chance to then consider this.
But I think having the thoughts out there to inform that initial vote would be important. So I'm glad we at least were able to have a bit of discussion on it to inform the select board's decision.
Okay.
We're also able to, at select board meetings, there's public participation area, time, and we can do that as individuals, or we can send emails in advance of those meetings as well.
I think Susan Klein is
We'll be
volunteering
there.
to get a time.
Let me know if you have any points you want me to make. I attend all the select board meetings, so I'll be at this one too. You can pay your ass.
Okay, so Susan Jacobson, procedurally, I believe we have gone through our agenda. I believe there are no minutes to approve. True?
Correct. Made it the whole night without cursing until now.
Look at that. Okay, but wait, there's one more thing. I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, made by Susan Klein, seconded by Kristen. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed to adjournment?
I'm going to abstain.
Jonathan Hurwitz abstained. Okay, thank you, everybody. Again, we will see you same bat time, same bat channel next week at
Not same,
No.
same, different day, Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it's Wednesday today. Thank you. Today's Thursday. Next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. I will see everyone then. Thank you so much for your time and participation.
Good night, Mary Ellen. Oh, boy.